Chapter 363. You have triggered the mission, Visitor from Afar. Mission Introduction. When you saw her for the first time, her eyes were imprinted in your heart. They were like a hazy fog, a dark well, a deep abyss. A voice sounded in your heart, telling you that you wanted to take this woman away. Mission requirements. Rescue her from the slave market, keep her by your side, and keep her by your side for 6 days. Mission completed. Reward: 1,800,000 experience and an unknown reward. Is this mission introduction going to be a text adventure game? Han Xiao felt goosebumps all over his body and was speechless. This woman was definitely not simple. He had never seen this character in his previous life, so he had no impression of her at all. Maybe no players had discovered her before, so she was a hidden character that had not been exposed. What's so special about her? Han Xiao asked curiously. The projector shows that her body structure is not that of an ordinary universe race, Horlade said. Her body contains the bloodline of some ancient creature. We can't find a matching file, so we don't know what race she is. After the energy detector test, the energy reaction in her body is far beyond that of normal creatures. Her level is constantly fluctuating. The lowest is at least grade C super, and the highest is even grade B. Why is such a strong super under your control? Han Xiao was surprised. He pointed at the shackles and self-destruct collar on the woman. Those things can't kill a grade B super. Horlade rubbed the jewelry ring with his finger and said with a smile, "Of course, we don't have the ability to control someone above grade C. However, she doesn't know how to use the energy in her body, so she has no combat ability. Plus, she willingly stayed here." Han Xiao was stunned. There's something wrong with her memory. She can't remember most of her experiences. She only remembers language, but her intelligence level is not that of a baby. She has very high intelligence and can communicate. So, she's someone with amnesia? It's not as simple as amnesia. Horlade pointed at his head. Normal people with amnesia will feel panic and curiosity about their identity and environment. However, her thinking is very strange. She doesn't have the curiosity or impulse to find out who she is, why she's here, or what she wants to do. She doesn't panic because she has no memory. She's like a person who's half awake, peacefully staying here without any thoughts of searching for a memory. Her life form is very special. She doesn't seem to have any instincts or desires. She doesn't need to eat or excrete. What a special individual. Han Zhao's eyes flashed. The stranger this woman was, the greater the secret she was hiding. He couldn't help but be curious. What's her name? I gave her a name, Arosia Sislama Doniers. There were 50 to 60 words in this list of names. Horlade mumbled for a while before he finished. I usually call her Arosia for short. The corners of Han Zhao's eyes twitched. You're so poisonous. Why did you come up with such a long name? Did you have nothing better to do? Or is it that you, a black-hearted merchant who sells slaves, possess the legendary golden Chinibu soul? This sudden quest gave a considerable amount of experience, and there was also an unknown reward. To a certain extent, the reward was proportional to the difficulty. Han Xiao decided to give it a try. Since he couldn't rob her, he would buy her with money. Han Xiao asked, "How much is she selling for?" Horlade put on the smile of a businessman. "Not expensive. Only 300,000 anus. Goodbye." Han Xiao turned around and left expressionlessly. "You want to learn from me? Why do you have to make things difficult for me?" Horlade hurriedly chased after him and yelled, "We can negotiate if you think it's too expensive. How about 200,000? 100,000? 50,000? Okay, I'll take a loss. I'll sell her to you at least 10,000. Han Xiao had a suspicious look on his face. 30 times discount. How could there be such a thing? As the saying went, if something abnormal happened, there must be something wrong. Thinking about the 6-hour time limit in the quest, he suddenly became alert. After thinking about it, Han Xiao temporarily put this quest aside and continued to test him. This price is about right, but I still want to buy other rare slaves. Don't you have any other goods? Horlade heard that, grinned, and said, you're in luck. I'm going to add a new batch of rare goods. You can come and take a look then. Han Zhao's heart skipped a beat. This batch of new goods should be the silvers. Luckily, they weren't delivered yet, so the mercenaries' plan could be implemented. That's great. I'll come and take a look at the goods then, and I'll buy that Erosia too. Han Xiao pretended to be happy and expressed his sincerity to buy, but he still did not pay. After a few perfunctory words, he was ready to leave. Horlade had no choice but to let his brother send Han Xiao away. Horlade was the only one left in the underground prison corridor. He pouted and mumbled, "What do you mean by paying when the time comes?" He definitely doesn't want to buy Erosia. When he took over this slave market, Erosia was already locked up here. The previous owner told him that he did not need to give her any special treatment and could just sell her normally. However, there was once a customer who bought Erosia. A few days later, Erosia, who was taken away, appeared out of thin air in this prison cell, giving him a huge shock. The customer came back angrily, and only then did he know that Erosia would suddenly disappear on her own after being taken away and mysteriously return to the prison cell. Horlade asked the previous owner and found out that Erosia had already existed not long after Floating Dragon Island was built. The owner at that time reported the situation, and it reached the ears of the Floating Dragon Island's ruler. That willful, beyond grade A boss came over to take a look, and with the principle of just kill what you don't understand, he killed Erosia and turned her into ashes. However, after a few days, Erosia appeared again as if nothing had happened. The big boss came over to kill her again. After repeating this more than 30 times, he finally came to the conclusion that this was a space wonder, some kind of strange phenomenon that was hard to explain. According to his observations, only one Erosia would exist at the same time. If she died, she would suddenly be reborn after a period of time. However, the short-term memories of her previous life would disappear, and she would return to her initial amnesia state. If she left this prison cell, she would also suddenly disappear from somewhere else. No matter what building this was, she would return to the location of the prison cell. According to the conclusion, regardless of whether she died or was bought, Erosia would not leave this place for more than 6 days. The Floating Dragon Island's ruler was very casual and threw the space wonder to the slave market to deal with. Therefore, the owner sold it as a commodity to cheat the buyer of money. Horlade shook his head and subconsciously looked at Erosia's prison cell. Erosia, who was originally sitting in the corner, was standing in front of the window. Through the window, only a pair of deep and calm eyes could be seen. Horlade was startled. After a while, he turned around and left. In the prison cell, Erosia's eyes followed Horlade's figure as he moved. However, this was a one-sided window, and the scene outside could not be seen from inside the prison cell. I've asked around. The silvers are not here yet. Returning to the team, Han Xiao reported the information, and the 3 leaders were energized. Great, we can carry out the rescue plan. Purple Gold's leader, Serene, said, "Time is tight. We don't know when the scavengers will arrive, and we don't know their identities. It's best to split up and ambush at all the main roads leading to the slave market. There's only one chance, so we can't miss any suspicious targets. We have to save the silvers before they are sold to the market." The few of them decided to split up and ambush. The ambush location extended from the dock to the slave market, and every street and intersection had to be equipped with mercenaries. Using the distance from the slave market as a standard, the ambush line could be roughly divided into 4 layers. The first layer was the furthest, which was the dock, and the 4th layer was the closest to the slave market, which was around the market. The 3 leaders considered that Black Star was not afraid of criminals like them, so Han Xiao was assigned to the 3rd layer. This position was slightly safer than the dock where criminals gathered, and Goa's team was responsible for the last layer. Chapter 364. A brass bullet was casually tossed into the air. The floating island flew past a dazzling star. An array of light shone through the buildings in the street, illuminating the spinning metal bullet. It was like a curved mirror, reflecting Han Zhao's handsome face. The bullet spun a few rounds, reached its highest point, and then slowly fell down. At this time, a drop of bright red blood splashed over. It was like a sniper had accurately hit the falling bullet. Pa! Han Zhao's fingers closed, and the bullet was caught. He opened his palm, and the bullet lay quietly in the middle of the black mechanical suit's glove. The cold metal was dyed with a touch of warm red. Not far away, two groups of thugs who seemed to be interstellar pirates started a fight because one of them looked at the other. Roars and laughter mixed with the sound of guns and cannons were deafening. The thugs who fell to the ground found peace. Their blood was like falling plum blossoms in the wind, splattering all over the street. On the side of the street, a group of floating Dragon Island residents hid and watched the show. Han Xiao and a few of his teammates were sitting on the scaffolding of an excavator by the street, watching the fight from afar. A splash of blood landed beside them. TSK, they're fighting again. How many times has it been in the past 2 days? Han Xiao shook his head. He was in full mechanical suit, and his helmet was folded, revealing his head. The players around him were wrapped tightly in Sunil soldier armor. It's already the 7th time, Pork Bun replied immediately. A reporter's memory was indeed good. Everyone waited patiently. The Black Star mercenary group had been guarding this street for 2 days, and it had split into several teams to guard the various intersections. In these 2 days, just the street that Han Xiao was in charge of had already seen 7 brutes brawl. The temper of the foreign criminals was easily triggered, and the players fully understood how dangerous this place was. 3 of the times, different brutes had provoked Han Xiao. Han Technician was very considerate and helped them cremate their bodies for free. After killing 3 waves of brutes and showing their claws, the crowd was much quieter. At this time, the brutes who were fighting missed their target and destroyed half of a house. It was not loud, and it crushed a few residents who were watching the show. All of a sudden, all the thugs stopped fighting. Fear appeared on their faces. They couldn't care less about anything else and scattered in all directions. Not long after, the sound of aircraft flying past could be heard. 3 low-altitude aircraft about 7 to 8 meters long appeared. They were dark gold in color and shaped like dragons spreading their wings. There was a pocket-sized dragon-shaped symbol on the body of the aircraft. These were the vehicles of the Dragon Guards. The 3 spaceships caught up with the brutes. Cannons extended from the bottom of the spaceships and shot out golden lasers, piercing through the brutes' bodies easily. After chasing for a while, and more than half of the brutes were killed, the Dragon Guards turned around and left. Only the Dragon Guards were allowed to fly combat spaceships on the floating island. If the brutes killed civilians, the Dragon Guards would enforce the law immediately. Han Xiao had seen such situations a few times in the past 2 years. He felt that the rescue plan this time was really dangerous. If they could not save the captives quickly and accurately, the risk would increase exponentially if they got into a fight. At this time, go send a message. The people of Blades have locked onto the suspect. Move out. Han Xiao received the location. All the mercenaries joined the same channel and shared the location of the suspect. At this time, the suspect had just landed at the dock and was escorting large metal boxes. It was a team of slave traders. One of the mercenaries in Blades had the transformation ability and turned into a beast that was half wolf and half dog. His sense of smell was extremely sensitive. He smelled the scent of the silvers on these slave traders and locked onto the target. Porter, Black Star, you guys bring people over quietly and ambush them on their route. We have more people, so we have to destroy the enemy with one strike. Don't get into a fight. Goa, you take the people of the circle and guard the perimeter. If we fail, you'll be our insurance. Since the target had been locked onto, there was no need to continue following them. The plan sounded quite reliable. Since everyone was on the same side, Han Xiao naturally had no objections. He gathered all the members of Black Star and split up to go to the ambush location that Serene had set up. It was right at the border between the dock and the city, so it was very chaotic. Peggy walked down from the spaceship. All the slaves were placed in large boxes that were electrified, controlled by shackles and self-destruct collars, waiting to be brought to the buyer. Thinking that they were about to be sold for a large sum of money, this group of scavengers was excited. Peggy was not that excited. He led the team and went to Horlade's slave market. Entering the dock street, This team of slave traders was very conspicuous and attracted the attention of a large group of brutes on the street. Many people were tempted. Some recognized Peggy and greeted him from afar. Peggy was a famous slave trader in the Shattered Star Ring. He had business dealings with many pirates and scavengers. He had some reputation, so he would not be attacked on Floating Dragon Island. After walking for a while, Peggy suddenly stopped. His pupils constricted, and his vertical pupils almost became a line. His head gradually flattened like it was going to become a snake's head. The snake scales on his body became clear and tough. Peggy was a shape-shifting esper. Some kind of snake bloodline in his body had undergone atavism. He had extremely sharp senses and early warning. He sensed that someone was following him, and there was a faint murderous intent in the air. His strong intuition told him that he would encounter something if he continued to walk forward. Oh, the smell of an enemy. Is it coming for me? Who could it be? Peggy's eyes were cold. He stopped, waved his hand, and said, "Go back the way you came. Return to the spaceship." Then he turned on the communicator. "My dear Horlade, I've arrived at Floating Dragon Island. Come and get the goods yourself this time." Horlade was confused. "What's wrong with you? You used to send the goods over. Why do you want to go this time? Also, why did you transform for no reason? You look like a snake. Too ugly." "I sensed murderous intent," Peggy said impatiently. "Someone is targeting me." "Humph, it's probably related to the captives this time. I think someone wants to steal the goods. I'll wait for you on the spaceship." "It's too troublesome for me to get the goods," Horlade said with dissatisfaction. "I don't want to go to a dock full of pirates and scavengers. Then ask the dragon guards to protect you. You're the leader's subordinate anyway, so you definitely have the ability to ask the dragon guards for help. I think you're just giving me a hard time." Horlade's face fell. He did not have the authority to order the dragon guards around. Although they belonged to the same organization, if he wanted to ask them for help, he would have to give them money. He did not like any behavior that increased the cost. However, Peggy insisted on his opinion and believed in his vigilance. He would not take any chances. Horlade had no choice but to compromise. The two of them hung up. Why did they turn back? The Blade Legion's tracker had a puzzled look on his face as he sent the news to Porter. Furthermore, in the streets far away, Han Xiao, Serene, and Porter had already set up an ambush with their respective troops. When they received the message, they all frowned. Attention, the target did not continue forward. According to the route, he seems to be returning to the spaceship. Did the negotiation with the buyer fall through? Porter was confused. Because Peggy had finally shown his face, Serene searched the Army's archives and found Peggy's information. He was shocked. This is not good. That scavenger is called Peggy. His Esper ability is to transform into a snake. He has extremely strong senses, close to short-term foresight. He might have sensed danger. Originally, they did not want to alert the snake, but this snake was too sensitive. It had already been alerted, and the other party had become vigilant. At this time, Goa, who was guarding outside, sent a message with a serious tone. "There's an accident. Horlade left the slave market and seems to be heading to the dock. It's very likely that the buyer will pick up the goods himself." Everyone's expression changed. Han Xiao thought for a while and said, "Then there's no other way. We'll kill our way over and save them. We can't let the two sides meet up. Our time is limited, so it's best to act now." The original plan was not bad, but the situation was very unpredictable. Serene felt that Han Xiao was right. They could only attack in haste now. He told everyone to get close to the target quickly. At the same time, he gave another order for a few people to start the spaceship in advance. When the time came, they would grab the hostage and leave immediately. Peggy returned to the dock that was filled with brutes. When he was still a few hundred meters away from the spaceship, the mercenaries finally approached him. "Go." Serene did not have time to care about anything else. With a roar, more than 200 mercenaries tore off their disguises. Their battle suits changed shape, and all kinds of abilities exploded, charging toward Peggy's team. Han Xiaoxin's mechanical suit quickly extended a helmet to protect his head. He turned around and said, "Let's go too." He took out his electromagnetic gun, fired from afar, and charged forward. Behind him, more than 50 players in the same armor raised their large-caliber machine guns and charged forward like a flood of steel. There are indeed enemies. Peggy narrowed his eyes. He had been on guard for a long time. He had his men quickly pull out their guns and shoot. He was very cunning. He quietly shot at the other brutes and dragged the other gangs into this. The dock was a huge square. There were no residents. They were all outsiders. This was the most dangerous place. The mercenaries and Peggy exchanged fire. Bullets rained down. Many stray bullets hit the brutes nearby, and there was a roar. "Who's hitting me? Ouch, my eyes. Damn mercenaries. Do you want to kill us?" The dock was the most chaotic. Groups of brutes were also affected and joined the battle. A chaotic battle broke out. Chapter 365. Bang, bang. Bullets rained down. There were more than 200 mercenaries, more than 100 peddlers, and hundreds of thugs who had joined in the melee. In total, there were 7 grade Bs involved in the battle. The dock was in chaos, and explosions rang out one after another. Colorful flames flashed and dazzled the eyes. The mercenaries' goal was very clear: to rescue the captives. However, Blades and Purple Gold were stopped by brutes midway. They met 2 Grey Bee pirates and were caught in a fierce battle. The 2 of them could not get away. Han Zhao's team entered the battlefield from the weak side and went straight to the root of the problem. They quickly surpassed Blades and Purple Gold's team and approached Peggy. Seeing this, the 2 of them immediately changed their tactics, from charging to protecting Han Zhao's team. Serene yelled, "Black Star, we'll take care of your left and right. Don't worry about the other enemies." The battle was too chaotic. It was hard to tell when the Dragon Guards would appear. The biggest mission of the mercenaries was to rescue the captives and then escape. Now was the time to race against time. The players all displayed their abilities, and like a sharp knife, they opened up a gap. Halu's battleship Slicing Blade swept horizontally, and all the obstacles below grade B were swept aside. It was extremely fierce, and the silvery white flames splashed out as if they were free. Suddenly, a burning pugilist wave came from the side. Han Xiaoxin's mind moved slightly, and the hovering shield shuttle turned into a single-sided shield to protect his body. He was bounced back more than 10 meters and knocked away a few brutes. Not far away, a Grey Bee pugilist pirate was attacking the Black Star mercenary. "I'll deal with him. Don't stop." Haluz immediately turned around and ran toward this person. He reached out and touched the battleship's Slicing Blade. A strong radiance burst out. He slashed out and fought with that pirate. All the strong enemies were stopped by his teammates. Han Xiao could move forward without any distractions. Peggy's people were retreating toward the spaceship. They were only a few dozen meters away, and they would be able to board the ship in less than 10 seconds. However, there was still a human wall in front of Han Xiao. "There's no time to waste. I can only use explosive means." Han Zhao's eyes focused, and a dazzling electric current burst out from the inside of the mechanical suit. He activated the explosive ability of the mechanical suit, Snake, Devil, and his attributes were doubled. He violently blasted the enemies around him away. Then, he activated the magnetic link between the assault armor and the Batwing aircraft through neural control. The mounted equipment flew out of the equipment box, suspended in midair, and quickly assembled on his body. At the same time, he loaded both forms, and his speed increased sharply. Like a running train, his arms swept away the enemies in front of him like shovels and crashed into Peggy's team. "Don't!" A loud boom resounded. In an instant, everyone was thrown off their feet. Peggy's subordinates fell like wheat being cut down. The bullets they fired produced countless sparks on Han Zhao's armor and were all bounced away. They could not penetrate Han Zhao's defense for a while. "Stop fighting and board the ship immediately." Peggy's body expanded. His clothes were torn apart, and he turned into a pale golden python more than 10 meters long. The snake's body coiled around Han Xiao. He wanted to stall Han Xiao with his own strength. He only needed to hold on for a few seconds. Han Xiao used the explosive energy to push the mobile module to the highest power. The ground cracked, and he rose into the air like a phantom. The mechanical palm the size of a basin grabbed Peggy's snake head in a flash, grabbed Peggy, and slapped him to the ground. At the same time, the kinetic structure of the kinetic skeleton increased in pressure, and the gear speed soared. Amphiptera's biochemical muscles suddenly expanded, and a huge force poured into the arm. Bang! The snake head was slammed into the ground by the palm. Cracks spread, and the snake head was badly mutilated. Its body twitched wildly. He was only a C-grade shapeshifter. Facing Han Xiao, he could only be crushed. He could not even hold on for a second. Peggy was dizzy. His snake eyes suddenly reflected the iron fist that smashed down again. A touch of fear appeared in his eyes. The snake body collapsed and turned into thousands of snakes. This was the special use of Peggy's shape-shifting Esper ability. It was also his life-saving method. He had escaped many fatal crises with this move. Han Xiao's punch missed. He watched the snakes disperse in the blink of an eye and mix into the messy battlefield. He shook his head. His goal was to rescue the captives. There was no time to waste. He could only put away the idea of chasing and turn to defeat Peggy's subordinates. At the critical moment, Peggy's scavengers lost their will to fight and fled in all directions. Seeing this, the mercenaries of Blades and Purple Gold were overjoyed. Serene said, "Send them back to our spaceship immediately. Don't fight. Leave the battlefield quickly." Snatching the silvers meant that half of the mission was completed. They changed their direction and now had to return to the mercenary spaceship and leave Floating Dragon Island immediately. The mercenaries changed from attacking to protecting the box of the captives and walking through the messy battlefield. At this time, 5 dragon guards appeared, and Horlade was in the leading aircraft. When Peggy was attacked, he immediately notified Horlade. Knowing that the goods he wanted had been intercepted, Horlade was very anxious. He immediately spent money to hire a dragon guard captain that he knew, and he quickly rushed to the dock in the aircraft. "Captain Thean, those mercenaries took what I wanted. Don't let them escape." Horlade looked down at the battlefield and immediately saw the very conspicuous mercenaries. He was so angry that he gritted his teeth. Beside him was Thean, who was wearing the uniform of the Dragon Guards. Thean smiled faintly and said, "Don't worry, it's just a group of thugs. No one can resist us on Floating Dragon Island. Everyone fire." The subordinate controlling the spaceship asked, "Captain, who are we attacking?" "All of them." Thean waved his hand and said casually. The 5 dragon guards fired toward the ground. The density of the golden laser was like a rainstorm. The thugs fell to the ground one by one, and the thugs who were fighting immediately scattered. No one dared to fight back. Even the Grade B supers only hurriedly ran away. The cannon fire followed the mercenaries like a shadow. There were mercenaries who were knocked to the ground from time to time. The Dragon Guards broadcast, "Everyone listen, stop running immediately and surrender, or we'll kill without mercy." *T, the Dragon Guards intervened. "We're being targeted." Porter was furious. He could see the aircraft following them closely. It was obvious that they were targeting them. The good situation suddenly turned bad. According to the firepower of the Dragon Guards, they would have suffered heavy casualties by the time they reached the spaceship. This time, a laser shot near the Black Star mercenary and caused an explosion. A few players, including Li Gu, were blown away and fell to the ground. Li Gu fell to the ground. His butt hurt. Just as he was about to get up, he suddenly saw a black bead on the ground. Just now, when Peggy's clothes exploded, the black bead he had obtained from the silvers also fell out and rolled onto the battlefield. It was this black bead. "What's this?" Li Gu picked up the black bead, and notification popped up on the interface. "You have obtained an unknown item. Give it to a special person for a high reward, or you can take it for appraisal." Unknown item? It should be something good. I just don't know where it came from. Chapter 366. These Dragon Guards are on the same side as Horlade. Their target is also the Silvers. Goa said anxiously in the communication channel. Serlene's expression was terrible. If they surrendered, the guards would still make a deal with Horlade, and the Silvers would still be taken away and handed over to the buyer, which meant that the rescue mission would fail. If they did not surrender, they would not be able to afford the price of so many casualties. He was in a dilemma. However, the cannon fire did not stop, and he did not have time to think. As long as we control the dragon guards, the problem will be solved, Han Shao said with a deep voice. He was thinking the same thing as everyone else. However, Serene yelled, "Are you crazy? Killing the dragon guards is the biggest crime here. In this territory, the severity of causing trouble and assaulting the police were worlds apart. With that beyond grade A boss in charge, even though most of these dragon guards were ordinary people, they could still do whatever they wanted to the brutes and wanted criminals. I didn't kill anyone. We have an ice mage here who can freeze their aircraft." Before Serene could say anything, Goa rushed to the dock and said, "I'm going to do it." Goa moved quickly. Her eyes suddenly turned snow white, and a magic mark appeared on her forehead. She chanted a spell, and the magic ring on her snow-white finger started to shine. The free magic elements gathered and combined, repaired, and formed under the effects of the spell: magic power, secret circle, and magic artifact. The magic language was deconstructed and then reorganized into natural laws, creating changes to reality. A large amount of low-temperature water vapor suddenly appeared in the air. White frost spread out from under Goa's feet all the way to the aircraft. 5 icicles suddenly rose from the ground and grabbed the aircraft like claws. The magic low temperature turned the aircraft off. The aircraft flew forward due to inertia, and the icicles extended, turning them into ice sculptures very quickly. The icicles became a bridge connecting the aircraft and the ground, freezing the 5 aircraft in midair. Goa was a grade B mage, so her control was very strong. Although she froze the aircraft, it did not cause any damage. The pilot of the aircraft hurriedly used the control panel. All systems are temporarily down. Restarting. It is so cold. Theon was furious. How dare they fight back? Report to the top and ask for backup. Don't let them escape. Since the deed had already been done, the mercenaries could only seize the opportunity to escape. Everyone gathered together and boarded their respective spaceships. Han Shao sat in the upper rings car. The pilots who did not participate in the battle at the beginning had already started the spaceship. As soon as everyone boarded, the spaceship slowly lifted off and flew away from floating Dragon Island. The transformed Stalker of the Blades team had already confirmed that there was the scent of the silvers in the box. He opened the box, and, as expected, there were 15 silvers inside. They huddled together in the corner of the box, looking terrified. They could not see what was happening outside. The explosions along the way scared them to death. As soon as the box was opened, the silver screamed in fear. The antennae on its head shook so much that it looked very cute. It made Han Shao have the urge to pull them out. "You're safe. We're mercenaries hired by your companions. We're here to rescue you." Goa casually cast a reassuring spell to calm the emotions of the silvers. She told the team members to take out translators and put them on the silvers so that they could communicate with each other. Finally, the group of silvers calmed down. Goa contacted the employer, and the 2 groups of silvers met. Their eyes were filled with tears, and their conversation could be summarized as, "Buddy, I missed you so much." The employer counted and said with surprise, "Why are there only 15 people? Where did the other 2 companions go?" 2 people are missing? Goa was shocked. If 2 people were missing, the reward for this trip might be reduced. The group of silvers who were rescued had a sad expression and replied, "The 2 of them were thrown into space by scavengers. Their bodies are cold." Hearing that, Goa heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Thank goodness, they're just dead." Han Shao immediately raised his eyebrows. There's indeed no good among the mercenaries. How black-hearted. After a moment of silence, the employer said, "You've completed your mission very well. Please send our companions back. I'll pay you according to the agreement." After working so hard, they could finally earn their reward. Every mercenary's face was filled with joy. Thinking that he was about to get the last 2 advanced knowledges of compression technology, Han Shao was secretly excited. Boom! Suddenly, the spaceship shook violently, and they almost fell. The pilot hurriedly said, "SH*T, floating Dragon Island sent spaceships to chase after us." Everyone's expression changed. They went to the porthole and looked behind the spaceship. At this time, the three mercenary group spaceships had already left Floating Dragon Island's artificial ecological shield and entered the space environment, gradually leaving the floating island. However, a few Floating Dragon Island spaceships followed them out and fired at their spaceship. Lasers hit the shield one after another, making their spaceship tremble. Theon exaggerated the matter and reported it to the upper echelons. He thought that the mercenaries attacked the guards maliciously and broke the rules, so Floating Dragon Island's spaceship fleet chased after them and wanted to blow them up in space. On the dock of the floating island, a group of brutes looked at this chase in space. Floating Dragon wanted to make an example out of them, saying that anyone who broke the rules would have to pay the price. Didn't we just freeze their spaceships? Is there a need to make such a big commotion? Porter was furious. Start the hyperdrive engine quickly. As long as we enter the hyperdrive state, they won't be able to catch up to us, Goa ordered loudly. The mercenary piloting the spaceship tried to dodge as much as possible. Cracks appeared on the shield, but at the same time, the spaceship also sped up. The voice of the artificial intelligence system echoed in the spaceship. Activating hyperdrive engine. Power output 2%, 7%, 14%, 83%. Power output met. Warming up before hyperdrive. The spaceship gradually shook off the enemies, and the space outside the window blurred. It was about to enter the hyperdrive. However, something unexpected happened. Just 1 second before entering the hyperdrive, the mercenary group's spaceship froze without any warning. All the kinetic energy and inertia seemed to have disappeared into thin air. None of the mercenaries even felt the slightest vibration. Suddenly, the air inside the spaceship started to buzz. It was as if every inch of air had become a vocal cord, forming a terrifying sound wave that almost broke their eardrums. Not only did they shake, they even hit the ground. Attacking my cute subordinates in my home. Do you think you can just walk away so easily? The few spaceships of the mercenary group seemed to have been grabbed by an invisible hand and flew back the way they came. All the propulsion devices stopped working. No matter how hard the pilots tried to control the spaceships, it was all in vain. The players were shocked. They did not know what had happened. The Silvers were also confused. They were shocked. The hope of going home was right in front of them. They had clearly shaken off the enemy's spaceships, so why were they suddenly controlled? The mercenaries on the side had a drastic change in expression. He's here. Sereni's face was pale. Go was shocked and said, "We just made some noise. How did we attract the attention of the ruler of Floating Dragon Island? Maybe she's just too bored." Han Xiao was extremely annoyed. He did not expect the ruler of Floating Dragon Island to personally interfere in this kind of situation. It was like two ants fighting on the street. How bored would one be to stop and interfere? They were so close to completing the mission, but an unexpected factor suddenly appeared. Furthermore, it was an existence that they could not compete with at the current stage. He was so unlucky. The goddess of luck, also F*King, rejected his hug. Han Technician glared at Haluz, who was beside him, with resentment. What the F*CK? He was clearly bringing along a main character. How could he be so unlucky? Had this main character expired? Was it too late to return it now? The spaceship struggled, but to no avail. They were pulled back to the floating island dock by an invisible force field. The hatch was torn open by the force field, and the mercenaries walked out. In front of such power, resistance was meaningless. Han Xiao did not have any good ideas at the moment, so he could only take one step at a time. At this time, the dock was full of people stretching their necks to watch the show. The ruler of Floating Dragon Island was floating in midair. When the people on the ground raised their heads, their faces were filled with respect. This was respect and worship for absolute power. The throne made of void dragon bones was floating in midair. A tall and graceful woman was leaning on the throne with one leg crossed over the other. One of her hands was casually hanging on the armrest of the chair, and the other hand was supporting her chin. She looked down at everyone like a legendary big boss. Her soft black hair was at least 2 meters long. She was wearing a thin black dress with a wide open collar. However, there was no cleavage. She was flat-chested. Her skirt was split very high, revealing two snow-white long legs. They overlapped each other like two white snakes. The black skirt and the white legs created an extremely strong visual contrast, wantonly emitting an aura of seduction. Her figure was alluring and seductive, but her face could not be considered beautiful. However, she was very charming, without any signs of age. Her eyes were lively, and there were symmetrical, complicated black marks at the corners of her eyes. The patterns were like black thorns, just like eyeshadow. At this time, she was looking at everyone with a curious face. This woman had a series of titles, such as Lord of Floating Dragon, Land Ripper, Absolute Power, and so on. She was the creator and ruler of Floating Dragon Island, Dragon Emperor Ames. Chapter 367. Intelligent creatures could awaken their super genes, and through all kinds of training, their cells would give birth to a special biological energy, which was known as energy. His vital energy was like a surging river. His cells and genes were like stubborn rocks on the riverbed. As the river grew stronger, his genes started to transform, gradually becoming more perfect. It was as if he was compressing the evolution of a living being that had taken tens of thousands of years. Grade, it was a watershed, also known as the Calamity Grade. It was a high level of strength in the galaxy, and very few supers were lucky enough to reach this level. When their genes evolved to a certain level, without exception, they would reach an indestructible bottleneck. To describe it in a more fantastical way, it would be unable to see the road ahead. In the exploration era before the galaxy calendar, the three universal civilizations were still in the period where they pulled each other's hair and scratched each other's faces. The world thought that the various power systems were independent until Dr. Stuart Ona of the Radiant Federation created the energy level theory. Only then did everyone know that energy was the common point of all supers, and they merged into a large system, forming the standard of today's grade. At that time, Grade A was considered the end of the evolution of an individual's strength, and no one broke through the barrier of Grade A. War was a double-edged sword. Countless Grade A supers who had the potential to break through died in battle. But at the same time, the battlefield was also a catalyst. If they were lucky enough to survive, their potential would be pushed to the maximum. At the end of the war, there was finally a super who broke through Grade A. That was a completely different level, causing a huge commotion. The various civilizations did not expect that an individual's strength could reach such a level, to be able to fight against the powerful army that the three universal civilizations were so proud of. Although it was still small compared to the boundless galactic battlefield, no matter how strong the collective strength was, it was not as shocking as having such a strong strength controlled by an individual. A beyond Grade A existence itself was a type of deterrence, and this was one of the many reasons that led to the ceasefire between the three universal civilizations. After peace arrived, the existence of beyond Grade A supers had a deep meaning, and their status was very high. Gradually, the levels above Grade A had a detailed division. One level above was Grade S, and there were even higher levels. However, supers above Grade A were still called beyond Grade A. This was to remember history and respect for the strong, covering them with a layer of mystery. In the current galaxy calendar, there were only 4 known beyond Grade A supers in the Shattered Star Ring. All of them were famous and had countless titles. Ames's most popular nickname was Dragon Emperor, which had 2 meanings. The first came from her void dragon skeleton throne, and the second symbolized that she was the creator of Floating Dragon Island. This was her most famous achievement. At this time, Ames was floating in midair. Everyone at the dock felt a sense of pressure from the bottom of their hearts. More dragon guards arrived and surrounded the mercenaries. Countless guns were aimed at them. The people of the 3 mercenary groups were not sure about Ames' attitude toward them, so they were worried. The silver captive stood aside. Ames glanced at them and roughly guessed what had happened. She said with interest, "So it's the Silvers. So, you're the mercenaries hired by the Silvers?" Her voice was not crisp at all. Instead, it was somewhat hoarse and magnetic. Goa braced herself and said, Yes, the silvers were sold to Floating Dragon Island, so we followed them here. I'm sorry for the unexpected damage, but I hope you can let them go. She wanted to make a last effort. Now, she could only hope that Ames would let them go for the sake of the silvers. After all, the silvers were universe nobles and had a very strong background. Ames only smiled and did not care about the status of the silvers at all. This is the Shattered Star Ring, not the Sea of Star Spirits. Then, she controlled the throne to fly to the residence in the center of the floating island and said, "Bring all the mercenaries here." The dragon guards escorted them to the center of the floating island. They had no choice but to follow. At least Ames did not kill them immediately, so there should still be hope. However, they were not in a good mood at all. Looking back, the silver captives that they had saved with much difficulty were being escorted to the slave market by another group of guards. Horlade was in the group with a smug look on his face. The problem of the silvers was just a problem in Ames' eyes. She did not want to care about it at all. She only did it because she heard the report that someone was causing trouble. As for the other problems, she left them to her subordinates, so Horlade benefited. Horlade received the silvers safely, and Peggy's life was unknown. He did not even have to pay, so he was the biggest winner. The mercenaries' intervention made him very anxious at first, but now, he only felt that it was funny. These people worked so hard for him, but he got the biggest profit. What a joke. Horlade was in a good mood. He glanced at the mercenaries mockingly and left with the silvers. The people of the three large mercenary groups were depressed and frustrated. Porter was a straightforward person, so he cursed in his native language all the way. No one liked the feeling of failure. The guards escorting the Black Star mercenary happened to be Theon's team. Theon pushed Han Shao, sneered, and said, "You guys are doomed. How dare you attack the Dragon Guards? Her Excellency Ames will definitely crush you into dust with her great power." Han Shao was pushed, so he turned around and glanced at Theon. "What are you looking at? Go on your way," Theon yelled. He was pushed a few more times, but the force was as light as the wind and could not move him at all. He did not feel anything at all. Han Shao shook his head and ignored Theon. He thought about what he should do next. According to his understanding of Ames, as long as he did not kill her subordinates, there would be a chance for things to turn around. Although Ames was biased, capricious, and unpredictable, she was not cruel and bloodthirsty. The center of Floating Dragon Island was where Ames lived. It was a huge fortress that looked like a palace. There were dragon bone decorations everywhere. They passed through one room after another and walked into the exquisite hall, waiting for their punishment. After a while, Ames floated in from the side door of the hall. Her throne stopped in front of everyone. She held her chin and said casually, "You attacked my subordinates. Although there were no casualties, I will punish you. Will Sander, what are our rules?" A skinny man walked out from the side. He was almost like a bamboo pole, making people worry that he could be blown away by a gentle breeze. He looked like a joke, but he could also be very handsome. He had a pair of horns on his head. His skin was fiery red and covered in vein patterns. He also had a swinging tail and a pair of bony wings on his back. He was also a mixed race and possessed some kind of demon race genes. This man was called Will Sander, the captain of the Dragon Guards, a direct subordinate. He walked out from the crowd, narrowed his eyes, stroked his sparse goatee, and said casually, "According to the rules, those who fight back will all be executed." Everyone's heart skipped a beat. Ames nodded and said, "Then lock up the people of Ring, Blades, and Purple Gold. Let their army commanders pay the ransom." The rules are execution. Will Sander choked and thought to himself, "My words are the rules." Ames' tone was calm and domineering. Will Sander's eyes twitched, and he felt wronged. "Then why did you ask me?" Ames blinked and said, "I was just asking." She basically did not care about anything and had forgotten what rule she had said in the past. She only asked casually because she felt like it. Now that the rules were changed, she could be very capricious. "Contact your army commanders and ask them to pay, and I'll let you go." Ames had some relationship with the three large mercenary groups. Occasionally, she would hire them to do some things, and the three large mercenary groups would not charge her for it. Furthermore, every time, the army commanders would help her personally. They just wanted to be on good terms with her. As the saying goes, do not hit a smiling person, and Ames did not want to make things difficult for the people of the three large mercenary groups. Hearing that, Goa, Serene, and Porter all heaved a sigh of relief. They did not know that Ames knew their army commanders and only felt that they had escaped death. However, Ames turned to Han Shao and said with a playful expression, "Then, it's your turn. If you have nothing else to say, I'll do it." The three large mercenary groups were fine, but this mercenary group was not famous, so there was no need to give them special treatment. The atmosphere suddenly became tense, and the expressions of the people of the three large mercenary groups changed. These mercenaries were not indifferent. They had fought side by side and had formed a friendship. They could not just watch their comrades get killed in front of them, so they all became anxious. The air around them became stagnant. This was not a psychological effect, but Ames' force field starting to condense. Chapter 368. Just as I thought, Han Shao had thought of many possibilities on the way there. He had a certain understanding of Ames, and the casual nature of a strong person was very obvious on her. At her level, most problems that were difficult for ordinary people to choose were easy for her. She was too lazy to think, and just did whatever she wanted. The way of thinking that focused on weighing gains and losses mostly came from the fact that the individual could not change the external environment. Compared to the overall environment, the individual was too weak and could only put the weight on the side of the scale that was beneficial to them. Ames' way of thinking had long jumped out of the barrier of a weak individual and did things based on her preferences. If possible, who would not want to live according to their wishes? Ames' power was her passport. From another perspective, this also meant that she was not ambitious. The four beyond grade A supers in the Shattered Star Ring had all built their own organizations, and only Ames' organization was the most lax. Floating Dragon Island was not her territory, but more like her daily residence. She stayed at home all year round, and her subordinates and guards were like housekeepers or cleaners. She had almost completely given up her power. She did not have any ambitions. So in the broken galaxy, all the civilizations of order gave her face and were not willing to provoke this neutral person. The best way to deal with such a chaotic neutral person was to cater to her interests. As long as one showed goodwill and threw out something that could attract her interest, one would not be in danger. Han Shao happened to know a lot of things that could attract Ames' interest. The force field slowly pressed down, and a solidified air approached. Han Shao cleared his throat and said with a deep voice, "Please wait a moment, Your Excellency Ames. I hope to use a piece of information to save my life and the lives of my team members. I think you will be interested." Ames raised her finger, and the force field stopped. An invisible barrier surrounded everyone. Second Prince poked at it, and the air barrier was just 20 centimeters away. The air became indestructible. Ames did not say a word and looked at Han Shao with interest, telling him to hurry up. Killing people was not her hobby. She wanted to know how this mercenary would save her. The struggle of life in the face of death was always a wonderful drama. Watching it could change the boredom of life. Therefore, even if these people were just dust in Ames's eyes, she was willing to spend time to communicate with them, just like how the high and mighty humans like to study other animals. Han Shao prepared for a moment and began his performance. "I didn't spend much time in the Shattered Star Ring. I usually stayed in Uberly Hub. One day, I met a person on the street. He was a very common galaxy human. I couldn't tell how old he was, and he was dressed like an ordinary galactic traveler. He was originally walking past me, but he called me from behind. When I turned around, he suddenly said something to me that didn't make sense." "What did he do?" Haluz urged. He saw that Ames yawned and did not seem interested, so he quickly signaled for Han Shao to get to the point. Han Shao coughed and said, "I was also confused at that time because I didn't know him at all. Plus, I didn't understand what he said at all. But now I finally understand. Hurry up." Haluz clenched his teeth. "I'm so anxious. The death omen is already shining. Can you stop keeping me in suspense at this time? I still have a large race to feed. I can't die. Hey, when you see Ames, tell her not to wait. I don't want to see her yet." Bang! An earth-shattering aura spread out, and everyone present was blown away. They landed heavily on the ground and grimaced in pain. They turned around and saw Ames, who had been lazily standing up from the throne. Her expression was no longer calm, but filled with a mix of joy and anger. It was as if she had finally received the news she had been waiting for, but it was the opposite of bad news. Everyone was shocked. They did not know why this super strong person could not control her emotions and power all of a sudden. Ames landed on the ground. Her black hair fell to her legs like a waterfall, and her bare feet stepped on the warm bone ground. She slowly walked toward Han Shao, fully unleashed her aura, and asked, "What did that person look like?" The ordinary people of the Dragon Guards all fainted, and those who were still conscious struggled to get up. Han Shao took a deep breath to relieve Ames' Haushika pressure. He struggled to open his mouth and said, "I don't remember the details clearly." He looked quite old, and his hair was very messy. He looked no different from a normal person. Oh, I remember now. His biggest feature was his eyes. His pupils were shining, just like he deliberately hesitated, as if he could not think of a word. His eyes were like a dark universe, and his pupils were like a star that lit up in the depths of the universe. Although it was only a weak fluorescent light, it could light up the entire universe. "Is that right?" Ames said. Yes, that's right." Han Shao replied, and heaved a sigh of relief. Ames must have thought of the person he wanted her to think of. "That's good." Ames seemed to be immersed in her memories. She mumbled to herself, "Why don't you want to see me? Didn't the promise count? Didn't you say that you would come and find me when I became a famous person in the universe?" Guard Captain Wilsonder's heart sank. He had never seen his boss show such a weak expression like that before. It was like a girl who had been abandoned by her sweetheart. This made him very uncomfortable. Ames was a goddess in his heart. She was strong, beautiful, and mysterious. He was deeply shocked when he first saw her. The admiration from the bottom of his heart made Wilsander willing to give up the organization he had cultivated and join Ames alone. He stayed on Floating Dragon Island and managed this messy territory day in and day out. That's right, he was a subordinate who had a crush on his boss. This was also the motivation for his work. At this moment, Wilsander was very envious of his brothers. If only he had fainted on the spot, he would not have had to see this scene. Who is that man to her? Is he really her lover? Wilsander's heart was sour, but he was also very curious. Ames came back to her senses and sat on the throne again. She stared at Han Shao silently for a while before slowly saying, "Since he chose you to pass the message to me, I will also give you a choice. 2 paths, turn into dust or work for me. I'm willing to work for you." Han Shao nodded. Becoming Ames' employee was definitely much better than dying on the spot. Ames' past was very mysterious. Almost no one knew about it, but Han Shao knew her secrets. For a top expert like Ames, the players in his previous life were naturally very curious. Through the mission descriptions of different characters, they pieced together the experience of Ames and put in the posts of various important figures. Han Shao knew even more about her than she did. Not only did he know about her past, but he also knew about her future. With the priority of information, Han Shao finally chose this phrase after thinking about it for a long time. It was most likely to alarm Ames. The person he was talking about was also a legendary figure who had a special meaning to Ames. He was almost the most important person in her life, but he had disappeared without a trace. Ames occasionally hired mercenaries to find this man. That person was a diviner who could see a person's future. Han Shao pretended that this person asked him to pass the message in advance. With how much Ames treasured that person, he was like an object that was liked by that person. He was basically in no danger. Moreover, Ames had never revealed this matter to anyone, so Ames would almost never suspect that Han Shao knew about her past and was tricking her. In her opinion, Han Shao was just a mercenary who was caught by chance, and that person had the ability to see the future. It was more likely that this person told this mercenary in advance to pass the message. Even someone as strong as Ames would not have guessed that Han Shao was an anomaly. Although the great mechanic Han did not like the feeling of being treated as a substitute, His emotions would not stop him from doing what he wanted to do. When he did not have enough strength, he could immediately change his mindset. If it was obvious that he would not be able to beat the other party, even if he died, he would definitely not be stubborn and try to be gentle. Chapter 369. Well, let's just say that writing is for my entertainment. Just like how everyone reads it for entertainment, there's no need to be so angry. The discussion board is also for everyone to use. You can think whatever you want. You can urge me to update or scold me, as long as it's fun. As for why I don't update, I'm not that bored. I want to write more than you guys. It's just that I've been like this ever since I started updating my first book. The more words there are, the harder it gets. How can I be so arrogant? I posted another single chapter. To be honest, I don't really like posting single chapters unless it's absolutely necessary. Can I just write it down? When I stopped updating during the National Day holiday, there were also people who were trying to stir things up in the discussion section. Actually, there was no need for that. This is just a normal novel, and I'm just an author who doesn't have much ambition. I'll say something taboo here. If you think this novel is interesting, you can read it. If you don't think it's good, you can always find something you like in the vast sea of books. Chapter 370. Em seemed to be a little disappointed. She waved her hand and told Wilsander to deal with it before floating away. The mercenaries were shocked. What's going on? 1 second, they were yelling about killing, and the next second, Black Star is on the enemy's side. What are we going to do? Are we still on the same side? How come I don't know about you? Haluz said. Are you lying to her? There are a lot of things you don't know, Han Xiao said calmly. She's a pinnacle expert. How could she be tricked so easily? Same here. Haluz agreed. Even he would not be tricked, not to mention the famous Dragon Emperor in the Shattered Star Ring. The guards walked up and took the people of the 3 mercenary groups away. Before Goa was taken away, she moved closer to Han Xiao and said, We're locked up. Only you can move freely. Now that you've become AIM's subordinate, try to convince them to let the silvers go. Only you can complete this mission. Then, the people of the 3 mercenary groups were taken away. Porter and Serene winked at Han Xiao, telling him to act according to the situation. The 3 mercenary groups were all wiped out. Although they did not know why Han Xiao suddenly became AIM's subordinate, Han Xiao was the only one who could move. He was electricity, he was light, he was the hope of Goat Village. The silvers will depend on you, brother. Wilsander walked up and told everyone to follow him. They left the hall and went to another tall building. Don't worry, since Ames recruited you, you're our colleague. Ames treats her subordinates quite well, so you don't have to worry. I'll take you to see the head butler. She'll arrange your positions, Wilsander said with enthusiasm. Han Xiao nodded. He obviously knew the pros and cons of being Aim's subordinate. Most of her subordinates were random, and she only had 3 important subordinates. One was the head butler who was in charge of daily affairs, who was Aim's cousin. The second was the logistics manager who protected Floating Dragon Island, a skill mechanic. The last one was the guard captain in front of him, Wilsander, who looked weak but used to be a pirate. The 3 of them had their own positions and were Aim's most capable subordinates. They had the title Floating Dragon Trio. In Han Zhao's previous life, most of the players who came to Floating Dragon Island received missions from the 3 of them. Han Xiao spoke to Wilsander in a friendly tone. He had some understanding of Wilsander, so they quickly became close. After chatting for a while, Wilsander could not hold back his curiosity. He suddenly grabbed Han Zhao's shoulder, put his head together, and said, Hey, Black Star, that person you just saw, what's his relationship with Ames? I've only seen him once. How would I know? Han Zhao's eyebrows twitched. You seem to have some thoughts about Ames. Wilsander was not embarrassed at all. He laughed heartily and said, Haha, although she never agreed to my pursuit, my handsomeness and bravery will move her heart sooner or later. Handsomeness? Han Xiao looked at him carefully and said, According to the aesthetics of the demon race, you're not a typical handsome guy. In fact, that person was not Aim's lover, but her teacher. In the eyes of the players, that person was a mysterious businessman. If they met by chance, other than buying things, there was a chance to trigger a message mission, just like what Han Xiao did. That person did not want to see her, and he did not lie to Ames. In fact, he even let Ames know about this earlier, so she did not have to wait. Ames' past was very mysterious. In fact, it was not because of her background, but because her birth was too ordinary. She was originally an ordinary girl who was abandoned by her family at a young age. She was adopted by her teacher and awakened her Esper ability. She learned from her teacher and built her foundation. Later, her teacher left for some reason, leaving behind a promise to continue encouraging Ames. When she became famous in the universe, he would come back to find her. However, after Ames became where she was today, there was no news of her teacher, so Han Xiao took advantage of the loophole. They came to a tall building. This was the official business center of Floating Dragon Island, dealing with all kinds of daily affairs and business activities. The group arrived at the top floor. This was a large office, and there were more than 10 assistants frantically dealing with matters. The head butler sat behind the table and read through documents. This was an ordinary-looking woman. She was Ames' cousin and her true confidant. "Jenny, these are our new companions. Give them positions," Will Sanders said as soon as he walked in. The head butler, Jenny, did not even raise her head. She continued reading the documents and said concisely, "Name, ability." She spoke very quickly, as if she did not want to waste a second. "Black Star Mechanic Grade B," Han Xiao said, and the players learned it. As soon as they finished, Jenny replied immediately, "Black Star, report to the logistics manager. They're lacking powerful mechanics. The rest of you will join the guards. Your information has been recorded, and the uniforms and badges will be sent to you in 2 days." The players became guards, and he became logistics. His mechanic level was just what the logistics manager needed, so he did not have any objections to this arrangement. However, he was separated from the players, which meant that both sides had to act separately. This was when the role of an officer came into play. After leaving the building, Han Xiao said, "Herluz, lead the team temporarily and protect them. Don't let them do anything rash." "I know, don't worry." Herluz nodded solemnly. "You too." Since he could not leave, he would let Herluz lead the team to ensure that the players would not be without a leader. However, other than a few players who liked to seek death, most of the players were more stable. Although they were shocked by the sudden change in the situation, they believed in Han Xiao and would take it one step at a time. "Haha, I will take care of your team and let them form their own team." Although Will Sander was skinny and gloomy, he was actually very straightforward. After the conversation earlier, he and Han Xiao had a good impression of each other, so he decided to help him. The logistics work of Floating Dragon Island was to maintain the various floating island devices. Han Xiao came to the logistics department alone. This was a huge high-tech workshop with the least number of people in it out of the 3 departments. As Han Xiao entered the door, a large insect-like creature with 6 arms and 2 legs walked out. What was special about this creature was that it was wearing a mechanic's outfit. "You must be Black Star. Welcome. We are really short on manpower, and we finally have a new mechanic." This insect-like creature was the logistics manager, a type of insect-like intelligent creature. It spoke in a squeaky voice, which was translated into an old human voice through a translator. His name was Hire. Hire was a high-level mechanic who had worked for Ames for many years. Han Xiao had only joined for a short time, but he had already met the 3 important managers of Floating Dragon Island. From this, it could be seen how casual Ames was in recruiting subordinates. The head manager was her cousin Jenny. The guard captain was Will Sander, who used to be a great pirate and demon hybrid. The logistics manager was even an insect-like creature. The logistics work is to maintain the Floating Dragon Island's thrusters, anti-gravity devices, ecological cycle devices, and drilling harvesters. Sometimes we also build and repair aircraft and spaceships. Although Hire looked ferocious, he was very kind. After understanding the work, he brought Han Xiao around the logistics department. After looking around, Han Xiao was pleasantly surprised. Not only was the logistics staff not a hard job, but it was also very beneficial to him. He could come into contact with all the machinery of Floating Dragon Island. He had the interface, so he could derive the blueprints of some of the machinery. Furthermore, the biggest benefit was that the material warehouse was open to the logistics staff. Apart from repairing, No one would ask if they built their own things in private. It was the default logistics benefit. There were many very rare materials, such as the bones of the Void Dragon race. After going through the procedures, Han Xiao was officially part of the team. For a few days, he followed Haier around to familiarize himself with the work, and he was quickly accepted by the other colleagues as a member. The player's side was also very smooth. Most of the floating dragon guards were ordinary people, and Herluz led the players to form a team. The other guards did not dare to mess with them. After a few missions, they slowly adapted to the change in identity, turning from outsiders to floating dragon islands enforcers. Slave market, the silvers were captured, and Horlade was very excited. He had been looking for customers these few days, and a few big customers had secretly offered him a price. He was not satisfied with the price and was still negotiating. At this time, Horlade received a communication request from Peggy. "Haha, you're still alive," Horlade joked. "I almost lost my life." Peggy's voice was hoarse. He had been severely injured by Han Xiao and escaped at the last moment. After getting through the situation, he gathered the rest of his men and returned to the spaceship. He called this time to ask for money. "I've handed the silvers to you. When are you going to give me my reward?" "What reward?" Peggy frowned. "What do you mean? Are you going back on your word?" No, Horlade said slowly. "You have to understand that your goods were stolen by those mercenaries. These goods don't belong to you anymore. You didn't give them to me, and I took them back. So, why should I give you money?" Peggy's face was gloomy. He hung up and cursed. Profiteer. The silvers were the most valuable goods. Horlade had taken advantage of him, and he knew that he could not get them back. He had been beaten up and lost the goods, so there was nothing he could do no matter how angry he was. The rule of survival for criminals was the law of the jungle. Even if Horlade denied it, he could only accept that he was unlucky. Those bastard mercenaries. Compared to Horlade, the mercenaries were the biggest reason. Peggy hated the mercenaries even more. He clenched his teeth and smashed the communicator. Just as Peggy was sulking, an inconspicuous spaceship stopped at the harbor beside him. Chapter 371. This spaceship belonged to the Dark Star Special Task Force, disguised as ordinary travelers. The group walked down the gangway and stepped onto the dock of Floating Dragon Island. The eyes of the surrounding brutes immediately stared at this group of seemingly ordinary travelers. The members of Dark Star walked into the city discreetly, turned into a few alleys, and passed through a narrow path between two houses. Suddenly, a group of muscular galactic pirates appeared in front of them. They looked back and saw that the path they came from was also blocked by a group of brutes. Ordinary people shouldn't come to a place like this. You have to pay for this suggestion. The leader of the strong pirates had a ferocious expression. He raised his gun and pointed it at the leader's forehead. The other pirates smiled creepily. After waiting for a while, the leader did not say anything else, so they were all confused. One of the subordinates pushed the leader's shoulder, and suddenly, the leader's body collapsed. His clothes fell to the ground, and black powder spilled out. The ferocious expression of the pirates turned into fear. They immediately turned around and ran. Before they could run a few steps, all the pirates turned into black powder, leaving only piles of clothes on the ground. The Dark Star members glanced at them, did not do anything, and continued on their way. They were used to this kind of scene. This was the ability of their captain, Ashes. He could control carbon atoms to a certain extent, which was the nemesis of carbon-based creatures. As long as a creature had carbon in its body, he could cause extremely terrifying true damage. Even supers with energy protection would be heavily injured. This was the origin of Ash's codename. His Esper ability potential rating had reached A+. Ashes was the new generation of Ace that Dark Star was preparing to cultivate. The things in the secret message bead were products that the organization had bought from a research organization in another star field at a high price. Dark Star had worked with the other party in secret for many years. In order to keep it a secret, the other party would always send different races to the Shattered Star Ring, coincidentally, to deliver the goods secretly. This time, the Silvers were transporting the goods, but there was an accident, and the carrier was captured. The goal of this special task force was to retrieve the secret message bead. Ashes brought his people to find a place to stay and set up anti-detection equipment in the room. Then, his subordinates went out to gather information. Not long after, everyone returned to the room to discuss business. Yes, the silvers are locked in a local slave market, right here on the map. We need to find a way to contact the transporter. What's the plan? Rob the slave market and rescue the carrier? If we only rescue one silver, it will raise suspicion. What we need to do is to rescue everyone. Only when all his subordinates had finished their discussion did Ashes open his mouth slowly. Don't use force yet. This is the Dragon Emperor's territory, after all. I'll go to the slave market and buy Enlin back. On floating Dragon Island, beside a certain large drilling equipment, Han Shao was carrying out maintenance while a bunch of workers craned their necks to watch. After screwing in the last screw, the drill returned to normal, and the workers continued to work. Han Shao picked up the toolbox, turned around, and walked away. He opened the panel and glanced at it. Most of the machinery on floating Dragon Island is large equipment, and the technology is relatively advanced. My knowledge is not enough to reverse engineer the blueprints, but I did derive the Dragon Guard's aircraft. Han Shao thought to himself. After working in the logistics department for a while, he secretly learned the blueprint of the combat aircraft through the interface. Its official name was Dragon Butterfly Reconnaissance Aircraft. It was anti-gravity and could fly within the atmosphere. It was fast, agile, and medium-sized. Each aircraft could carry 6 to 10 people. This was the blueprint that Haier had developed, and Han Shao had learned it. Han Technician had always had the idea of building a multi-passenger vehicle. With the new blueprint technology, he could overcome some technical difficulties and greatly improve the performance. When there was no maintenance work, the logistics personnel could move freely, so he used his free time to build the prototype of the vehicle. Returning to the private workshop that was allocated to him by the logistics department, a large spherical mechanical structure stood in the middle. The mechanical arm lifted it in midair, and his construction speed was much faster than before. Previously, he had obtained instant-level disassembly and assembly from the silvers. The effect of this knowledge was to greatly increase the speed of disassembly and assembly. He spent 10 potential points to max it out. The biggest benefit of logistics was that he had the authority to use the materials in the warehouse. Building a vehicle did not require any cost, so he saved a lot of money. However, there were some very precious materials that only Manager Haier could use, such as the Void Dragon skeleton. Han Shao was very tempted. The Void Dragon skeleton was unbelievably tough, even tougher than all the alloys that he could create at the moment. There was a high-level mechanical suit blueprint whose core material was the Void Dragon skeleton. That was another series of individual combat suits, and its performance was even stronger than his current Amphiptera. Furthermore, it had the special ability of the Void Dragon skeleton. In terms of actual combat ability, it was almost 2 to 3 times stronger than Amphiptera. That mechanical suit blueprint was not very complicated. It only required advanced knowledge, and the only difficult part was the materials. The Void Dragon skeleton was very rare and could be used as a limited mine. Floating Dragon Island was one of the few places in the entire Shattered Star Ring that produced Void Dragon bones. If he could get enough Void Dragon bones, he would be able to build a new generation of mechanical suits, not just the Snake series model. The Void Dragon skeleton was a treasure, and the bone marrow extracted from it was also very useful. Unfortunately, it was all controlled by Haier. However, it also showed the benefits of Floating Dragon. Even if Ames did not purposely manage the organization, there were still many good things in the warehouse. Now that I've integrated into the group and gained a firm foothold, it's time to find Horlade and talk about the silvers. My current identity is actually beneficial. It's convenient for me to negotiate openly. Han Shao thought to himself. Since he could not count on the 3 mercenary groups, he could only rely on himself. Han Shao came to the slave market again. This time, it was different from the past. Just as he was about to walk through the door openly, someone suddenly called him from behind. Black Star, wait. Theon caught up with him, panting. Oh, it's you. Han Shao glanced at him. At this time, Theon's face was swollen and covered with bandages, as if someone had done a few eye surgeries. There was also a group of subordinates following behind him. Theon said with fear and trepidation, "Can you ask your subordinates to stop bullying us? What are you talking about? We're colleagues." In order to improve the quality of the guards and better protect the safety of Floating Dragon, my team members kindly carried out combat training for you. How can you call that bullying? Han Shao said sincerely, "I was wrong. I was really wrong. I'll apologize however you want me to." Theon said with a crying face. He no longer had the arrogance from before. Theon's arrogance came from his identity as a guard, and he could look down on all outsiders. However, Han Shao and the others had suddenly become his colleagues, and he was stunned. His bitter days had come. Han Shao could not be bothered to waste time teaching him a lesson personally. He casually threw a mission to the players, and they happened to be in the guards as well. He beat them up at 3 o'clock, and then at 5 o'clock. Theon was beaten to the point where he wanted to die. He complained to the head captain, but Wilsander turned a blind eye and did not care at all. Theon could not take the beating anymore, but he did not have the courage to leave the guards. Without this identity, how could he act like a tyrant? Even his life was in danger. He was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. He had been waiting near the slave market for the past few days, hoping for the stars and the moon. Finally, Mechanic Han had arrived, and this scene had happened. Han Shao smiled and said, "Aya, why are you apologizing? You were just following your duty. You didn't do anything wrong. What will it take for you to let me go?" Theon looked like he was about to cry. Every dog has its day. How could he have foreseen this? If he had known, he would have restrained himself. People say that health is priceless. How much do you think your health is worth? Han Shao smiled evilly. Theon trembled and took out his communication terminal. He gritted his teeth and said, 1,000. Han technician was shocked. "You think you are so cheap?" Then 1,500. Han Shao shook his head and said, "It seems that my friend needs to help you establish the right values." 2,000. I only have this much money in my account. This is my savings for several years. Please, I really only have this much money. Sigh, I'll give you a discount. Who asked me to be so kind? Han Shao did not comment. He took out his communication device and opened the transaction page. He glanced at Theon's subordinates and smiled. "What about you guys?" His smile was like the devil in the eyes of the others. He trembled as he transferred the money. The notifications sounded, and Theon felt like he was about to collapse. There was bitterness in his mouth. Not only did he lose the reward that Horlade asked him to do in private, but most of his savings were also extorted by Han Shao. With 34,000 anas in hand, his wallet was filled again. Han Shao smiled with satisfaction, waved his hand, and walked into the slave market. Theon's team had accepted Horlade's money back then, which was the biggest reason why they had failed. It was not Han Zhao's style to not make a huge cut. However much Theon had taken, he would make him pay back with interest. After entering the slave market, Han Shao met Horlade in the office this time. Horlade put on a smile, walked up, and said enthusiastically, "Please take a seat. What do you want to drink?" "Don't bother, I'll be direct. I want to take the silvers away. Name a price." Han Shao went straight to the point. Horlade knew that he was a mercenary back then and knew that he had become a colleague, which was why he was so friendly. However, Horlade was the head butler subordinate, so he could not make Horlade submit, let alone use force. Han Shao was here to negotiate. Horlade put on a fake smile and said, "What happened back then was a misunderstanding. I'm sorry if it caused you any inconvenience, but the deal is done. The silvers are already goods. A big client called for a deposit, so I'm in a difficult position." Han Shao raised his eyebrows. Suddenly, he smelled the scent of a colleague and said, "Don't keep me in suspense. You already have a plan, right?" Horlade chuckled. "I heard that your employer cares a lot about your people. I believe they are willing to pay. How about this? You help me convince them, and I'll give you 10% of the transaction. How much do you want?" Han Shao asked. Chapter 372. Han Shao narrowed his eyes and stared at Horlade without saying anything. After a while, He shook his head and said, I won't help you convince them. Keep the money. Horlade was a little surprised. Why? There are rules in every profession. Han Shao became a mercenary to earn money, but since he was in this line of work, he would abide by the rules of this line of work. He valued credibility, and betraying his employer was the worst violation. He would not help Horlade cheat his employer. Didn't you become a mercenary for money? 15 people can be sold for 3 million anus. Even if you only get 10%, it will take you a long time to earn. Seeing that you're my colleague, I'm willing to share some of the profit with you to make up for the failure of your mercenary rescue. You don't appreciate it? Horlade did not think much of it. I'm sorry, but my creed is credibility, and integrity is the foundation. Han Shao was not moved. The money was indeed a lot, but he did not want to follow Horlade's wishes. Plus, he accepted the Silver's employment not for money, but for the advanced knowledge of compression technology. Regardless of whether the Silver would compromise or not, if he'd pay the ransom, what was the use of mercenaries? He wouldn't be able to get his reward. Horlade curled his lips. Up to you. I'll negotiate with your employer myself. Han Shao took out his communicator and contacted his employer. The face of his Silver appeared on the screen. The employer saw Han Shao and was a little surprised. After thinking for a while, he remembered that Han Shao was also one of their mercenaries. He asked in confusion, Why are you the one contacting me? Where are the people from Ring? By the way, where are you now? When are you coming back? Han Shao shook his head. There was an accident. We were intercepted, and the rescue target was sent to the slave market. All our efforts were in vain. The people from Ring, Blades, and Purple Gold were all captured. I am now in charge of this mission. I found the manager of the slave market, and he wants to negotiate with you. Your people are in my hands. Horlade adjusted his clothes and slowly repeated his conditions. The Silver employer was shocked and angry. Too expensive. We can't accept this price. Sorry, you don't have a right to bargain with me. Horlade was confident that the Silvers would not abandon their own kind. 3 million anas was a lot, but the Silvers were rich. If they were willing to fork out a lot of money, they would be able to barely take it out. We need to discuss. The Silver employer clenched his teeth, but he did not dare to reject. Contact me when you've made up your mind, but time is limited. There are many big clients who miss your people. You're not the only buyers, Horlade threatened with a smug look. Han Shao put away the communicator, pushed the door open, and left with no expression on his face. Horlade seemed to be waving and saying goodbye, but he did not move from his seat. When he stepped out of the door, a man wearing a mask was about to walk in. The two of them brushed past each other. At this moment, time seemed to have slowed down. Han Zhao's hair suddenly stood up, and he felt a prickling sensation between his eyebrows, as if there was a knife in front of his eyes. The flow of time seemed to have slowed down. The moment they brushed past each other, the two of them looked at each other subconsciously. Their eyes collided, and it was like two sharp blades clashing. A cold light flashed and turned the surrounding environment gray, leaving only the other person in their eyes. The scene seemed to be frozen, and it was silent. The next second, color and sound broke this moment. Like an ice mirror breaking, the two of them walked past each other peacefully. After taking a few steps, Han Shao looked back, and his eyes flickered. The higher one's grade, the more sensitive their senses would be. When they came into close contact with someone strong, they would have a vigilant instinct. Just now, the masked man gave him a very strong sense of danger. It was not just his strength. The masked man's temperament carried a murderous aura that had killed countless people. Only those with strong senses could notice this detail. He had a feeling that this masked man was also here for the Silvers. I wonder where he is from. Han Shao shook his head, threw away all the distracting thoughts, and contacted the employer alone. The Silver employer said with an annoyed tone, You saved them. How did you get caught again? This is your negligence. What do we do now? Do we really have to pay? Han Shao replied with a few words and said, Don't be in a hurry to compromise. Since the captives are safe for now, I'll think of another way. Okay, remember, you must prioritize their safety. After hanging up, Han Shao scratched his head. He had a headache. This is not easy. The captives are all in Horlade's hands. I'm now a member of Floating Dragon, so I can't rob them openly. If I want Horlade to release them unconditionally, there's only one way. I have to take the route of the upper echelons and convince Jenny, or even Ames. He suddenly had some ideas. He quickly left to think of a plan. At the same time, the masked man who brushed past him was Ashes. He also found Horlade and expressed his intention to buy the silvers. How much can you pay? Horlade asked. 50,000 per person. Horlade shook his head, uninterested. Ashes frowned. This price is almost half the market price. You think it's too little? There's a big client who's offering more, Horlade said. 70,000. Ashes raised the price with a deep voice. Horlade still shook his head. 100,000 at most. Still not enough. Then how much do you want? Ashes was very patient. Horlade chuckled. That big client offered 200,000 per person. Of course, the deal is not set yet, but if you can offer more than 200,000, that won't be good. Got it. I'll go back and think about it. Ashes nodded calmly, left the slave market, and returned to his base. Captain, how was the negotiation? A member of the Special Task Force asked. Ashes took off his mask and said calmly, change of plan. We'll snatch the captives. It was not that Darkstar could not afford it. The problem was whether it was worth it or not. Furthermore, even if they agreed to this price, that profiteer might use the excuse of the big client as an excuse to raise the price again and turn it into a bidding war. What kind of organization was Darkstar? We're a bunch of villains. If we obediently took the bait, would we still have the professional ethics of being villains? Far away in the Fawn Star system, there was a fierce argument on the planet where the Silver's employer was staying. They've already offered a price. What are we waiting for? Gather the money immediately. Wait, this is very strange. Could it be that the mercenaries have teamed up with the slave owners to cheat us of our money? The Shattered Star Ring is full of greedy and barbaric people. We have to guard against this possibility, someone guessed. No matter what, safety is the priority. The Ring, Blades, and Purple Gold mercenary groups have all failed. How can we rely on that Black Star mercenary group? If they take risks in order to complete the mission, they will put the captives in danger. Let's just pay up. What if they take the money and still don't release the captives? Someone asked worriedly. Everyone argued for a while. In the end, the captain was more stable and made a decision. They failed last time because of force majeure. I'm willing to trust them again, no matter what. Let's let the Black Star mercenary try first. If it really doesn't work, he will definitely give us an accurate answer. Paying is the last option. A team of players was driving an aircraft and patrolling an area. Ligo was in the aircraft. He avoided everyone's gaze and quietly took out the secret message bead. What the hell is this? Ligo murmured. The item clearly states that it can only be rewarded if it is given to a special person, but it doesn't say who the special person is. Do I have to trigger myself? Ligo was very experienced in games. This kind of event trigger mission item that did not have a clear hint usually required him to take the initiative and show the item to different NPCs. If he found a character with a different reaction, it was basically a special person. Chapter 373. Goa, Serene, and Porter's teams were all locked up in Floating Dragon Prison. They contacted their respective army commanders, paid the compensation, and waited for the army's upper echelons to come and apologize. Before that, they could not leave. They did not know what was going on outside while they were locked up. They stayed for a few days and were bored. Other than chatting, they had nothing else to do. The topic they discussed the most was naturally Han Shao. I wonder if Black Star managed to save the silvers. Porter mumbled to himself. I don't think so. Although Black Star has become AIM's subordinate, what right does he have? It's impossible for him to save them. Serene was not optimistic. He shook his head and said, You can't blame him. Even if it were me, I wouldn't be able to do anything in this situation. Plus, he joined Floating Dragon. Who knows if he will still be a mercenary? Since we asked Black Star for help, we'll trust him. Goa frowned. Serene was helpless. I want to trust him too. After all, he's our last hope. But what can he do? I don't know. Goa sighed. The mercenaries' morale was low. Even if they wanted to trust Han Shao, their rationality told them that this mission was basically a failure. You're looking for Ames? She's not here. She just left. Jenny flipped through the documents without even looking up. Where did she go? Han Xiao was surprised. Ames stayed in Floating Dragon all year round and almost never went out. She's not in a good mood, so she went out to find someone to fight. Jenny was calm. She pushed up the data storage glasses on the bridge of her nose and said, "The message you sent made her unhappy." Han Zhao's eyelids twitched. With Ames level, who else could she be fighting against? It had to be the other three beyond grade, as in the Shattered Star Ring. Hopefully, there would not be news of an uninhabited planet exploding for no reason in the near future. He originally wanted to go and convince Ames to let go of the silvers, but unfortunately, she was not around, so he could only wait for her to come back. Han Xiao did not want to betray her when she was not home. The risk was too big, and there was no need to do so. The Floating Dragon faction had many benefits for him. The chief housekeeper, Jenny, was very capable. She was not as gullible as Ames. Han Xiao did not have the idea of being convinced by her. Ames is not around, Jenny said. Floating Dragon has entered administration, and I am the highest officer. Will Sander has strengthened the guard, and Higher has maintained the gravity core. Everything is going according to the rules. You better not have any other thoughts. Don't do anything that you will regret. Han Zhao's eyes moved. He understood the meaning behind Jenny's words. He had only joined for a short while. Although the other colleagues did not reject him, Jenny had always sent people to secretly monitor Black Star's people. This was her duty as the chief manager, to clean up after all of Ames's decisions. Jenny's words were to warn Han Xiao not to have any ideas. Smiling, Han Xiao ignored Jenny's warning. He said goodbye and left the office. He returned to the logistics department and learned about his new job. Manager Higher brought half of the people to stay near the floating island's power core. The rest of the logistics staff were on standby at the headquarters to deal with the daily maintenance work. Han Xiao was the remaining part. Because half of the manpower was gone, the workload suddenly increased. Everyone was sent out, and they were very busy. Han Technician used all of his time to deal with all kinds of conventional equipment and aircraft maintenance. He did not have time to do anything else. A few days later, at the slave market, Horlade contacted Han Xiao and asked, "Has your employer decided to pay?" "Not yet." Han Xiao was repairing an earth drilling harvester nearby, so he answered as he worked. "Humph, don't waste my time. Tell them that I'll wait for them for the last 3 days, or I'll sell it to other buyers." Horlade's tone was impatient. He hung up the call directly, took a sip of the psychedelic drink on the table, and his eyes changed. If the silvers are not willing to pay, then the man with the mask a few days ago is the second highest bidder. In his eyes, Ashes was his backup plan, his backup plan. He was sitting on the fishing platform, and no matter what, he would be able to make a huge profit. Thinking about the huge amount of wealth that was about to be in his hands, Horlade was full of excitement and anticipation. He finished the drink in one gulp and started to hum an off-key hometown song. At the same time, pairs of eyes were hidden in the shadows, staring at the slave market. Today was the day that Dark Star had chosen to make their move. Ashes had made a plan. Of course, it was not a high-profile attack, but to sneak in and quietly take the slaves away, try not to cause a huge commotion. They did not know that Ames had left, so they acted according to plan. Ash's Esper ability potential was A+, but he was still in the nurturing stage. His actual grade was B+, far from his peak. Facing Ames, who could easily kill him, Ashes had to be cautious even though he was cold and arrogant. There were also a few groups of galactic pirates following Darkstar's operation. Ashes and the others disguised themselves and secretly found these teammates, promising to split the benefits of the slaves equally. Plus, they revealed part of the plan, so it was very easy to lure these pirates. This move was to confuse them and cover up Darkstar's true intentions. If exposed, it could attract their attention and create chaos. Has the power been cut off? Ashes asked into the communicator. I bypassed Floating Dragon Island's main artificial intelligence system and am implanting the interference device. It will be completed in about 2 minutes. Cut off the power supply of the slave market in the streets, temporarily cutting off the power supply. The surveillance will be cut off, and it will become a blind spot. The system will not detect the intrusion and will only trigger a false self-check. The virus I implanted can block the system's self-check for 17 minutes. Very good. Ashes nodded. For this operation, Darkstar had provided high-tech support. The team split into two groups. The other group cut off the power supply in the area and pretended to be a fault. Although it would cause some commotion, it would not trigger the alarm. The group led by Ashes would take the opportunity to act. As soon as the 2 minutes were up, the lights in the street flickered twice before everything went dark. Darkness replaced the brightness, and waves of commotion sounded in the streets. Ashes closed his eyes and entered the vision of his Esper ability. He sensed the sleeping carbon atoms around him, as well as the things he had planted in the slave market a few days ago. With a flick of his finger, his Esper ability was activated. Inside the slave market, the rocks in the corners suddenly cracked open, and metal balls fell out one after another. They spewed out a colorless, strong, hypnotic gas that quickly filled the entire building. The principle was to paralyze the nerves, and the hypnosis would not cause any damage as much as possible. Plop, plop. The workers fell down one by one and fainted. Horlade was shocked by the power outage. Before he could get up, he was knocked out by the hypnotic gas and fell to the ground unconscious. Ash's Esper ability could control carbon atoms to a certain extent. He could gather, separate, and change the molecular chain to change the form of matter, and so on. Many natural substances contain carbon. With his current strength, controlling a few rocks was a piece of cake. Under the cover of the darkness, the group broke into the slave market. It was silent inside. The distribution of carbon atoms was like a glowing handwriting, outlining the terrain. Ashes found the underground prison instantly and confirmed that the target was there. Because the power supply was cut off, all the entrances of the slave market were disabled. Ashes led the group to the underground without any hindrance. He opened the prison doors one by one, and all the slaves walked out in shock. They thought that they had regained their freedom and were very grateful. "Are you here to save us?" When the Silvers were released, they were overjoyed. They thought that Han Shao was a mercenary who came to save them. However, they soon realized that they had just escaped the tiger's den and entered the wolf's den. The Darkstar members all wore masks to cover their faces. Ashes said to the other excited pirates, "According to the agreement, I only want the Silvers. You can split the other slaves among yourselves." At this time, a group of brutes stepped out and said, "This is not fair. The Silvers are the most valuable. Why should we give them to you?" Ashes did not wait for them to finish and directly attacked. The brutes' faces suddenly twisted in pain. Their mouths were wide open, but they did not even have the ability to scream. Starting from their skin, their flesh and blood turned into black carbonized powder, and their bodies quickly collapsed. "Who else has a problem?" Ash's tone was cold. Everyone's face changed, and they kept quiet out of fear. Their greed was dispelled by this scene. They obediently shared the other slaves and did not dare to have any ideas about the Silvers. "We got them. Let's leave this place first and interrogate them in a safe place." The Darkstar members did not care about their partners anymore and left in a hurry. A few minutes ago, when the power was just cut off, the logistics department received a malfunction report. The smart program assigned the manual maintenance task to Han Shao according to the location of the logisticians. Emergency mission? Han Shao happened to be repairing the drill nearby. When he received the notice, he immediately put down his work and rushed to the area where the slave market was. There were no lights around, and it was dark. Han Shao turned on the sensor radar of the mechanical suit. Suddenly, he stopped. He realized that the image inside the slave market was blurry. It was obviously the reaction of the radar being interfered with. Something's wrong. Han Zhao's face changed slightly. He realized that something had happened. He immediately activated the jetting device and rushed to the slave market. As soon as he entered, he smelled the stimulating hypnotic gas. You have inhaled a strong, nerve-paralyzing hypnotic gas. Undergoing resistance test. Your END is over 100. You are immune to hypnosis. Your END is over 150. You are immune to sluggish state. It was dead silent inside. He turned on his night vision and was shocked when he saw the unconscious workers all over the floor. What's going on? Is there a thief here? Who has the guts to do this? Han Xiao was shocked. At this time, there were hurried footsteps coming from the stairs. Ash's people brought a group of silvers back to the ground. They saw Han Xiao standing at the door immediately and knew that something was wrong. We've been discovered. However, when Han Xiao saw that the silvers were rescued, he was even more confused. Who the F asterisk CK did my job? Did the employer find another group of mercenaries? Are we friends or foes? Which side are you on? Han Xiao could not figure out the identity of the other party. Before he could say anything, Ashes made his move. He controlled the carbon atoms in Han Xiao's body and used the same trick again, trying to turn this intruder into ashes. The Esper ability bypassed the mechanical suit and took effect on Han Xiao's body. You have been attacked by Ash's carbon atom deconstruction. You have received 1146 true damage. You have been attacked by Ash's carbon atom deconstruction. You have received 988 true damage. Your talent, Steel Body, has been activated. You are immune to all true damage. Through the interface, Han Xiao saw a series of -0 damage popping up on his body. He was unscathed. Ash's expression changed under the mask. He could sense the carbon atoms in Han Xiao's body, but he could not control the carbon atoms in Han Xiao's body like he could with other people. In his senses, the molecular structure of Han Xiao's body suddenly strengthened and became as solid as a rock. He could not change it at all. Looks like it's an enemy. Chapter 374. A blazing beam of light burst out like a golden spear, piercing through the darkness, and exploded on Ash's face. Boom! Flames burst out. Before the scattered light had even dissipated, a human figure dashed out. Han Xiao's reaction was extremely fast. The handle of the scythe popped out from his vambrace and slid into his palm. He swung it in a half-moon shape and expanded it into a huge black scythe. The scythe and the figure clashed. Clang! Sparks flew in all directions, and the sound of metal clashing rang out. A translucent hand grabbed the scythe, and the two sides clashed. The sound of friction could be heard. Han Xiao took a closer look. Ash's skin had turned into a diamond-like state. Sharp blades could not cut through it. It was extremely hard. The ground under his feet moved, and the carbon elements were separated and turned into dust particles. They wrapped around his legs like a tornado and quickly hardened. Han Xiao was shocked. He jumped back hurriedly and dodged before the soil hardened. He tore apart the diamond that had yet to form. Control of carbon elements? What a troublesome ability. The mechanical suit's analyzer detected the composition of the control substances. They were all made of carbon. Han Xiao was very experienced and immediately guessed the opponent's ability. He felt that it was troublesome. This kind of ability to control atoms was very rare. Its effect was usually very comprehensive. It could attack, defend, control, and even create materials. Many natural substances contained carbon elements, and the opponent's ability was the nemesis of carbon-based monkeys. Han Xiao was shocked. Luckily, he had a talent that was immune to true damage. Otherwise, he would have died. Steel Body came from the leader of the Germinal organization. Of course, with his current knowledge, the leader's strength was not enough. However, that old guy was still a main character and a boss. This talent was a molding talent, and its effect was very strong. You can hit me, but don't even think about dealing true damage. One had to know that true damage ignored resistance and was extremely dangerous. Even the toughest pugilists would feel terrible if they were hit by a true damage. With this talent, it was like having a safety net. Until now, Han Xiao had earned a total of 2 molding talents. The other one was elementary strength and life, which increased his health. As a mechanic, his health was comparable to that of a pugilist of the same level. He was so tanky that his enemies were disgusted. Anyway, Ashes was disgusted. Carbon atom deconstruction was a new way to use his Esper ability that Ashes had learned after breaking through to Grade B. It was a killer move against low-grade supers. The principle was to directly destroy the molecular structure of the opponent's body. The difference in energy and level had to be determined, and only when the target failed would they receive true damage. Normally, those with a lower grade than Ashes would not be able to pass the test. However, Han Xiao was such an anomaly. Although his grade was lower, he was immune to true damage. Go! Ashes suppressed the shock in his heart. His trump card had failed, and his other abilities were all conventional means of combat. They did not have enough killing power. Now was clearly not the time to fight, so there was no time to think. His Esper field spread out, and the ground and walls rippled like water. Countless carbon elements were stripped and reshaped. The powdery particles surrounded Han Xiao like fluttering black ribbons and quickly hardened into diamonds. They were of various shapes, such as spikes, barriers, cages, and so on, entangling Han Xiao. Crackle. The entire field was filled with floating and spinning carbon dust. It was like waves moving up and down, turning solid from time to time. It was a spectacular sight. Han Xiao gritted his teeth. The ribbons of dust were dense and unpredictable. They did not stop moving at all. He suddenly felt like he was in a bullet screen game. It was a test of his reflexes. The artificial intelligence of the Amphiptera mechanical suit quickly planned a dodging route. Han Technician moved and dodged, missing by a hair's breadth every time. His movements were extremely difficult. He was like a patient with epilepsy doing a street dance with a wire hanging from his neck. Convulsion. However, the effect was also very obvious. It looked dangerous, but it was actually as steady as an old dog. While Han Xiao was busy, Ashes took the silver and escaped out of the door. Han Xiao would not let the silver be taken away just like that. Just as he was about to chase after them, the mechanical suit suddenly alerted him that there was a high-energy reaction behind him. He dodged with a sliding step. Boom! All kind of attacks landed on the spot where he was originally standing, blowing up a huge hole. Han Xiao looked back. The group of pirates had also retreated with the slaves. They raised their guns and opened fire. Dozens of supers surrounded him murderously. Quick, kill the witness. He's only one person. Let's go together. Han Xiao was immediately surrounded and could not escape. Ashes and the others disappeared from his sight. He frowned and had to deal with this group of brutes for the time being. He was alone, and they were using their numbers to attack him. There was no way he could end the battle quickly. So Han Xiao decided to use the built-in communication device of the mechanical suit to call for help. After fighting for a while, the group of pirates realized that they could not do anything to Han Xiao at all. A few of them were even killed by Han Xiao, so they started to get anxious. This guy is quite strong. Don't waste time. Let's go. No, he saw our identities. If we inform the guards, we'll be exposed immediately. This group of brutes had different opinions. Half of them wanted to retreat. Just as they were about to retreat, the roof of the slave market suddenly exploded. Everyone was shocked and looked up in shock. A few dragonfly butterfly aircraft were hovering in the sky, shining down searchlights. The background was a colorful galaxy, and there were more aircraft coming from afar. This group of guards were all players. Han Xiao called them over with a simple call. Using the convenience of his position, he quickly arrived to help. Haluz waved and greeted them through the high-density glass. All the brutes were shocked. It was like being caught red-handed by the police. Han Xiao stepped back and left the range of the firepower. He curled his lips. Have you ever heard of a cloud-piercing arrow leading to the arrival of thousands of soldiers? You want to gang up on me? Burn your dreams. I have helpers too. All the aircraft opened fire and poured lasers at the brutes. Bang! Bang! The golden lasers were like a rainstorm, and a large group of these pirates fell like cutting chives. They were terrified. It's the dragon guards. Run. Split up. They panicked and did not have time to care about Han Xiao. They immediately scattered like birds and animals, covering their heads and running in all directions. The aircraft split up to chase after them. Han Xiao did not chase after them immediately. The dragon guards were higher up in the sky, so their hunting efficiency was higher. He did not want to move on the ground, so he was waiting for his bat wings to arrive. Ashes was the first to escape. He was already out of sight, But Han Xiao did not just watch. He secretly marked him. Halus, a group of mysterious people stole the silvers. I marked them on the radar. I've sent the information to you. Don't let them get away. Han Xiao outlined a glowing path on the map and sent it to Halus. He said seriously, they have a super, also grade B, who can control carbon elements. Be careful, maintain the shield. Don't fight with him before I arrive. Got it. I've already seen them. I'm following them, Halus replied. This time, Wolsender's communication came. He asked with a deep voice, what happened? Han Xiao repeated what had happened, emphasizing that the enemy had attacked Floating Dragon's assets with bad intentions, and that he was the one who had stopped the enemy. These enemies were so arrogant, daring to shit, piss, and fart on the head of the Dragon Guards. If he did not go up and kill them, he would have no shame. He was afraid that Wolsander did not get the main point, so he repeated it 3 times. Okay, I got it. Wolsander quickly hung up the communication, afraid that Han Xiao would repeat it a 4th time. However, Han Xiao had achieved his goal. Wolsander's mind kept repeating what had just happened, and he could not forget it even if he wanted to. The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. That's right. Who doesn't know that we, the Dragon Guards, protect the entire city? These people still dare to break the rules and look down on the Dragon Guards. Are they challenging me? Today, these people dared to steal the slaves, and tomorrow, they dare to blow up the floating island. What the F***CK? If I don't kill you all, I won't be the Dragon Guards. Wolsander pondered for a while and was furious. He ordered the Dragon Guards under him to move out. Since Ames was not around, the Dragon Guards were on standby at all times. They were on level 1 alert, extremely efficient. Aircrafts flew across the sky one after another. The residents and outsiders on the ground all raised their heads in astonishment. They had never seen such a grand scene, with so many guards. What was going on? Han Xiao looked around at the mess. When he saw the unconscious Horlade, his eyes lit up, and his mood instantly improved. He clicked his tongue and said, "Serves you right. You want to take my money? You'll regret it." When Horlade woke up and saw that all the slaves had been stolen, and his house had become clean and well-ventilated, Han Xiao wondered what kind of expression he would have. Thinking of Horlade's smug look, he could not help but gloat. Looking at the interface, there was a new message. It reminded him that he had discovered a criminal act, provided information, and blocked the enemy. Floating Dragon faction favorability increased by 400 points. Their relationship finally rose from cold to neutral. Han Xiao suddenly thought of something. Taking advantage of the waiting time, he walked into the underground prison and came to the secret door. He smashed the wall with brute force, revealing Aroshia's cell. The brutes did not notice this secret door, and Aroshia was still locked inside. In fact, Ashes had noticed the existence of a secret door, but his target was only the silvers, so he was too lazy to tell others. Han Xiao tore open the cell door and reached out to Aroshia. He still remembered that he had a visitor from a far mission, and the requirement was to take Aroshia away. Because Horlade was desperate for money, he did not buy it. Now was a good opportunity. If he did not take advantage of the situation now, Han Technician would not be able to get over it. He would not even leave a strand of hair for Horlade. Aroshia looked up and stared at Han Zhao's hand. Confusion appeared on her face, and she did not move. Right, she has no memory, and she is not very curious. Han Xiao thought of Horlade's introduction, so he simply went up and unlocked her shackles and collar. He grabbed Aroshia's hand and walked out. As expected, Aroshia did not have any intention of resisting. Her face was calm, and she allowed Han Xiao to pull her along like a boat drifting with the current, following his every step. Chapter 375. Who? Blue flames shot out from the bottom of the equipment box and flew over. The accessories assembled automatically, and the Amphiptera switched to flight mode. Location reported. Han Xiao quickly equipped himself and grabbed Aroshia to fly into the sky. He was not worried that Aroshia would be injured in the high-speed flight. She had superpower in her body, and even if she did not use it, her resistance would still protect her. Han Xiao sent the coordinates over, and the tactical screen displayed a three-dimensional map with Herlu's aircraft marked. The speed of the turbine in Han Zhao's wings soared, and the exhaust flame shot out. He directly went from stationary to high-speed flight without any buffer period. The mechanical suit could eliminate most of the load, and Han Zhao could handle the rest of the load. Orochia was held in front of Han Zhao's chest. Her hair danced in the wind, and her eyes were closed. She was not injured. After Han Zhao reverse-engineered the Dragonfly, he modified the bat wings and added anti-gravity propulsion technology, and its speed soared. While flying, Han Zhao thought about the other party's identity. Ash's carbon control reminded him of a super Esper ability that existed in theory, particle manipulation. It far exceeded the limit of a single element's ability and was almost omnipotent. It could form and deconstruct any matter. If the energy was strong enough, it could theoretically manipulate planets to split, recombine, or even form life. If it was more powerful, it could directly change the structure of particles and form antimatter out of thin air. It could also complete particle collisions without any machinery, simulate all kinds of physical phenomena, or even perform ultra-dense compression to form black holes with bare hands. This type of Esper ability that touched the origin of matter was too terrifying. It was like the omnipotent creator. It was listed in the super high-risk Esper ability restriction treaty by the three universes. There were hundreds of super high-risk Esper abilities that theoretically could exist in it. However, the pursuit of individuals always conflicted with the collective. The super high-risk Esper abilities in the treaty were ranked by busybodies and became a list of most wanted Esper abilities. Fortunately, most of the super high-risk Esper abilities never appeared. The ability to control particles had always been ranked in the top 5. There were no eyewitness reports. It was rumored that it could not be awakened by itself and had to be fused into a shape. Another rumor was that this ability was a living thing with consciousness. It was some kind of energy field-type life form that manifested as a self-flowing grand energy that wandered in the vast universe. It was said that there had once been a host of this ability, but could not withstand the enormous energy, and the host's genes collapsed and died. However, there were no eyewitness reports, so no one knew whether it was true or not. After all, there are all kinds of rumors in the universe. There were even rumors in the Shattered Star Ring that Dragon Emperor Ames was actually a man. Although carbon manipulation was a far cry from particle manipulation, there were similarities between the two. It was iconic and unique, and the name Ashes, revealed in the battle information, was a little familiar to him. Han Zhao racked his brains. Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration and a memory emerge from the water. His code name is Ashes, and his ability is to manipulate carbon, Darkstar's strongest combatant. Han Zhao was shocked and surprised. Ashes did not know that the information he had revealed in the battle earlier was enough for Han Zhao to guess his identity. Ashes originally wanted to keep it a secret, but he had already failed in front of Han Zhao. The reason he was able to confirm his target was because the codename Ashes and his ability were too iconic for the same person. In his previous life, with the mutation disaster as the boundary, the battle between Darkstar and Ghidorah gradually turned from a hidden one to an open one. Ashes stood out, and his ability was very difficult to deal with. He fought all over the world, and the war stimulated his potential. After reaching Grade A, the strength of his Esper ability increased by leaps and bounds, and he became Darkstar's strongest combatant. Tens of millions of Ghidorah players had died in his hands, and his famous speech was the most popular speech of the Darkstar players in that version. I am destined to become Ghidorah's nightmare. I will use slaughter to make them reflect on their backward traditions that have lasted for countless years. The bloodline theory that they insist on goes against the laws of reproduction and nature. It is this twisted ideology that created us, and after they repent, they will swallow the bitter fruit of the pure blood theory that has been brewing for thousands of years. Darkstar will rebuild Ghidorah from their ashes. When that time comes, there will no longer be pure bloods, and no one will be superior because of their bloodline. Discrimination will no longer exist, and no one will be born inferior. Half-bloods are tolerance, progress, and equality. We will eradicate the corruption. May life and hope bless Godora. Of course, although this speech sounded very cool and epic, Darkstar claimed to be revolutionaries. They believed that revolution required sacrifice and unscrupulous means. Other races, such as Sunil, suffered greatly from this. In the eyes of the lawful faction, no matter how loud Darkstar's slogan was, it was still a chaotic and evil terrorist organization. Ironically, Ashes was not a half-blooded Godora. He belonged to another race. He had been trained by Darkstar since he was young, and this hatred had nothing to do with him. From this, it could be seen that Darkstar's mental and spiritual construction was very impressive. Ashes was still in the secret training stage and had not reached the height of his peak. Han Xiao was the first outsider to know about Ash's identity. At the same time, he was confused. Darkstar's actions had always been very purposeful, and everything was focused on dealing with Godora. Why would they target the Silvers? Darkstar wants to use this group of Silvers to threaten Silver Lingming? Impossible. This is just a group of tourists. They don't have that much power. Even if they captured the entire Silver Council, they won't be able to threaten Silver Lingming. What is Darkstar trying to do? Han Zhao's eyes flickered. Could it be these Silvers have other secrets? A spaceship appeared in front of them. The hatch opened, and Han Xiao flew in. Peluz greeted him and said, "They have no intention of fighting back. They don't have a fixed route, so we don't know where their destination is. Continue chasing." Peluz nodded. He then saw Aroshia beside him and was stunned. He asked with surprise, "You are?" "Don't ask. I'll explain to you next time." Han Xiao did not have time to deal with Aroshia. Through the porthole, he stared at Ashes and the others on the ground. "We can't get rid of this spaceship. The other guards are on their way. We'd better leave as soon as possible," his subordinate said anxiously. Ash's face was solemn. The spaceship that was tailing them did not fire for a long time, which made him feel pressured. The plan was originally perfect. The culprit that caused the current situation was the witness who suddenly appeared. It would have been fine if he could kill the witness instantly, but that witness was not only a grade B super, but he was also immune to his carbon atom deconstruction. Unbelievable. When he used this move against targets weaker than him, it had never failed. AIM's weak organization was a fact that everyone in the Shattered Star Ring knew. However, no matter how thin a camel was, it was still bigger than a horse. The Dragon Emperor did indeed have powerful people under her command. The survival of the witness messed up all the plans. The other party was definitely a member of Floating Dragon's organization, which was why he was able to call the guards. Ashes was helpless. He could only say that luck was not on his side. Luckily, he found other criminals to work with. With those brutes attracting the firepower, Floating Dragon would not know that they were Darkstar. There was no way he could wait until it was safe to interrogate the Silvers alone. Ashes gave a signal, and the members of the Special Task Force directly exchanged signals with the Silvers while they were escaping. This would increase the risk of being exposed, but he could not care less. However, an accident happened. All the Silvers were confused. None of them matched the secret signal. There was no carrier in this group. Chapter 376. Ash's expression changed. He scanned the expressions of all the Silvers, and the fear in their eyes did not seem to be fake. They really did not know the secret signal. He almost had a mental breakdown. Luckily, he guessed another possibility in time. "Do you have other companions?" The Silvers did not dare not answer. They said in fear, We originally had 17 people, but 2 of us were thrown into space during the escort and are dead. The carrier had kicked the bucket and was thrown into the universe? The people from Darkstar were dumbfounded. What should they do now? At this time, the mummy of the delivery man had already floated to God knows where. They could not even find him. Ashes was also stunned. Suddenly, he thought about it. The slave trader must have searched the carrier's clothes. If the carrier did not hide the secret message bead well, it might have been taken away by the slave trader. There was still a chance. However, this meant that the Silvers saved him for nothing, and he was targeted by Floating Dragon because of this. Ash's face stiffened, and he felt extremely sad. If he had known this would happen, he would have gone to the slave trader first, but he did not know that the carrier was in an accident. Saving the carrier first was his usual priority. The carrier belonged to the organization he was cooperating with. After receiving the secret message bead, he would save the carrier if possible. If not, he would kill the carrier. Now this step was skipped. That damn slave trader completed their job, but the bead was missing. Furthermore, Ashes originally only wanted to steal the carrier secretly. It was all because of this accident that caused such a huge commotion. In summary, it could be said that he was extremely unlucky. Ashes was extremely frustrated. He waved his hand, and countless black dust spewed out from the ground, turning into a veil-like curtain that gently covered the pursuing aircraft. There was a shield attached to it, blocking the sight of the aircraft. This layer of dense black dust was all graphite, and the image of the observation device suddenly became distorted and blurred. The aircraft became blind, stumbling and hurriedly decelerating. "I'll chase. Haluz, don't follow. He can kill you easily." Han Shao stopped Haluz from jumping off the ship. He did not want this officer that he had spent so much effort to kidnap to fly away. After breaking through the graphite barrier, Han Shao took a closer look and was momentarily stunned. Ashes and the others had used their abilities to escape and disappeared without a trace. Only the Silvers were huddled together, shivering. They were no longer of any use to Ashes, so they were left aside. This would make it easier for him to escape and lower the Dragon Guard's soaring blood pressure. Only then did the graphite barrier dissipate and fall to the ground. This meant that Ashes had gone far away, and the aircraft was out of the range of his ability. He ran so fast. He was gone in an instant. Haluz was surprised. Just as he was about to give the order to continue the chase, Han Shao suddenly raised his hand and stopped him. "Don't chase. There's no need." "Why? Is it okay to let them escape? I told you we wouldn't be able to catch up to them." Han Zhao's eyes flashed. "Didn't you notice? These thugs helped us a lot." Everyone was stunned. They followed Han Zhao's finger and looked at the Silvers on the ground. They were all surprised. "That's right. Our hiring mission is to save the Silvers." After so many twists and turns, the Silvers were saved in an unexpected way, and they even fell into his hands. Han Shao would not let go of this opportunity. The most difficult part of rescuing the Silvers was Horlade, and this problem that had troubled Han Shao for a long time was solved in such a way. He even felt like thanking Darkstar. When the Sandpiper and the Clam fought, the fishermen benefited. Han Zhao's words were more effective than Wilsonder's. Everyone listened to his order and stopped chasing. Very soon, the other players' aircraft arrived and protected the Silvers again. Wilsander requested for communication and said, "The other thugs have been captured. Only the ones you were chasing are left. What's the situation?" Han Shao shook his head. "They escaped. One of them is very strong. Why are you the only ones with problems? If this spreads out, those outsiders will question the authority of our guards, and more people will challenge us. It will threaten the security of the floating island and destroy the stability of the residents. The long-lasting balance will be broken, and the world will be in chaos. Sigh, the consequences are unimaginable. When Her Excellency Ames comes back, my position in her heart will collapse," Wilsander complained. Han Zhao's mouth twitched. "Don't you have any idea? Your image in Ames' heart is already collapsing." He did not have the heart to break Wilsander's fantasy. Then, they would not be able to play with each other anymore. In fact, life forms at their level were like Paramecia in Ames' eyes, and subordinates were Paramecia raised by her. It seemed like he was also looking down on himself. Han Shao interrupted Wilsander's complaints and said, "It's okay. I know who they are." At this moment, a new idea popped up in his mind. The reason why Ember was so fearless was because he had done a very good job of keeping his identity a secret. However, he did not know that his identity had already been known by Han Shao. When his identity was exposed, he would definitely be confused and would not be able to figure out which part of the plan had gone wrong. Since he was the only one who knew this information, he could do something in secret and reveal Darkstar's identity to Floating Dragon Island. Coincidentally, Ames was not in a good mood recently. If a super strong person targeted them, Han Xiao felt bad for Darkstar just thinking about it. Darkstar did not want to get into trouble. That's okay. Let me help them get into trouble. After all, we are men who have worn the red scarf before, and the purpose of service is to help others. Because of the mutation disaster, Darkstar was definitely his enemy, so he was very happy. Furthermore, Han Xiao made a new discovery. Even Ashes was sent out. These silvers must have a big secret. Darkstar is preparing to make a big news. He asked the silvers who were still in shock, listened to the whole story, and grasped a few key points. First, Darkstar did not want to save all the silvers but a specific person. Second, this person must have contacted Darkstar in advance, or else he would not have given the secret signal. He must be a secret worker, and his companions did not know his identity. Third, one of the two silvers who died early was Darkstar's target. Ash's retreating at the last minute did not mean that he had given up. There must be a next step. Fourth, this should not be the first time something like this had happened. Connecting these points, Han Xiao sharply smelled the scent of a conspiracy. Since Darkstar was so serious and secretive, this matter must be very important to Darkstar. He suddenly had an idea. If he could secretly destroy Darkstar's plan, not only would he be able to annoy Darkstar, he might even be able to get something out of it. Furthermore, the enemy was in the light, and he was in the dark. This was his biggest advantage. It should be fine to help him in his heart. The only problem was that he did not know what Darkstar wanted to do. He lacked too much information. He started a plan in his heart. The guards cleaned up the ruins of the slave market, and the unconscious people were carried to the side. Horlade's eyelids trembled, and he slowly opened his eyes. He finally woke up. Horlade raised his head and looked around blankly. Then he stared straight at the ruins in front of him and slowly recognized the familiar silhouette. His mouth gradually widened, and his expression gradually became horrified. Then, a scream that almost pierced the eardrums of the people around him soared into the sky. Ah! The guards next to him hurriedly covered their ears and clicked their tongues in wonder. Oh, this high-pitched voice is comparable to Soul Blast. After screaming, Horlade collapsed on the ground. His heart ached, and he twitched, and he almost suffocated. He still remembered the last scene before he fainted. He was sitting on his luxurious chair, drinking a drink, and feeling excited about the huge sum of money that he was bound to get. However, when he closed his eyes and opened them again, his home was gone. He suddenly became a pauper and fell from heaven to hell in an instant. His mentality collapsed into pieces. What exactly happened? How did my home become like this? Horlade's gorgeous clothes were covered in dust. He hurriedly grabbed the guard next to him and questioned with a trembling voice. The guard explained everything. Knowing that the enemy was captured, Horlade's eyes lit up. He hurriedly asked, "What about my slaves? Where are they? Give them back to me." At this time, a righteous voice sounded from his side. "Horlade, don't worry. I will definitely capture all the slaves for you and minimize your losses." Horlade immediately looked over and was pleasantly surprised. The one who spoke just now was Han Xiao. He strode over, and all the players followed beside him. Behind them, all the slaves, including the silvers, followed closely. These slaves were all rescued by the guards. Han Xiao had just discussed with Will Sander and obtained the authority to gather all the slaves. "These are all my slaves." Horlade was overjoyed. Han Xiao's face was full of righteousness. He patted his chest and said, "Don't worry. If I find a slave, I'll return him to you immediately. After all, we're colleagues that won't be exchanged for money. Do you still need to find them? You brought the slaves here. Give them back to me." Horlade was shocked. Han Xiao widened his eyes, looked around, and ignored him. "We're the slaves. Just tell me. I will definitely capture them for you. Don't play dumb. They are right behind you." Horlade was anxious. "Behind me?" Han Xiao looked back with a confused face, shook his head, and said, "The ones wearing shackles and collars are the slaves. I only see a group of free people. Where are the slaves you mentioned?" Horlade finally understood Han Xiao's intention. His face changed, and he almost exploded in anger. Chapter 377. The brutes took away the slaves, and they no longer belonged to Horlade. The slaves were rescued by floating Dragon Island, so there were two deaths. Han Shao unlocked the shackles of all the slaves. No one could prove that they were once slaves, and no one could deny that they were free people. Horlade could not argue. The slaves were lost, so he could only bring them back, but he did not have the power. The only way was to bribe the guards. However, Guard Captain Will Sander was right beside him and had no intention of interfering. Obviously, he supported Han Zhao's position. With the guard captain's approval, who would dare to do anything? Horlade saw Theon among the guards. Theon trembled and hurriedly retreated to the back of the crowd. Seeing this, Horlade knew that he could not count on Theon. This guy was already scared by Black Star's people. Looking at Han Zhao's calm expression, Horlade was furious, but for the slaves, he could only suppress his anger. He could not be proud anymore. He walked in front of Han Shao and said angrily in a voice that only the two of them could hear, "All right, you win. You only need the silvers, right? I'll give you the silvers, and the other slaves have nothing to do with you. I can buy them back. Name a price." Han Shao had the upper hand, so Horlade could only give up the silvers and prepare to pay a huge price for the other slaves. Otherwise, his business would be ruined. "I just said, there are only free people here." Han Shao shrugged. Horlade misunderstood. His face darkened, and he said angrily, "Don't go overboard. You want to take all the slaves for yourself? The head butler will not let you succeed." "Take all? Hee, don't you understand? They are not slaves anymore," Han Shao said calmly. "Are you crazy?" Horlade's tone was shocked. He thought that Han Shao wanted more money. Only then did he understand that Han Shao was planning to let all the slaves go and really let them regain their freedom. It was too wasteful. He could not understand. Why would Han Shao save these slaves who had nothing to do with him for free? At this moment, an aircraft landed, and the chief butler, Jenny, rushed to the scene with her men. Horlade's eyes lit up as if he had found someone to rely on. He glared at Han Shao and hurried to Jenny. "Chief Butler, I hope I can get my slave back." Horlade recounted what had happened and complained to his superior. "The new Black Star wants to let my slave go." "How can that be? He's looking down on you." "I understand." Jenny nodded and walked towards Han Shao. Horlade was immediately emboldened. He followed behind and stared at Han Shao with a sneer. Jenny walked in front of Han Shao and said, "Black Star, you did well. If you hadn't interrupted the enemy's plan, they might have succeeded. This would be a huge blow to the prestige of the Dragon Guards. Furthermore, it happened when Her Excellency Dragon Emperor was not at home. You did very well. I will record this in your file and increase your trust authority. Those who make contributions will receive material rewards. You can ask for monetary rewards or other things." She paused and added, "Although this sentence is a bit late. Welcome to Floating Dragon Island. Plus 300 floating dragon favorability. Current relationship, neutral, 700/1000. Han Shao nodded. He was not surprised by Jenny's attitude at all. When he was chatting with Will Sander earlier, Jenny had also joined the communication channel. Han Shao had told her what had happened. He had contacted Jenny privately long ago and reached a consensus. Only Horlade was in the dark and thought that he had found a life-saving straw. The more Horlade listened, the more he felt that something was not right. Why did Jenny not seem to be standing up for him, but specifically praising Han Shao? He could not sit still and carefully interrupted. "Chief Butler, about the slaves." Jenny glanced at him and said calmly, "We only buy and sell slaves. We never capture slaves ourselves. Since they are free, let them go." Jenny did things according to the rules. Floating Dragon Island was a neutral organization after all, and they would at most do the slave trade business. They would not lower themselves to capture slaves themselves. Furthermore, Han Shao was the hero of this incident, so she would take this into consideration and give him the appropriate privileges, tacitly allowing Han Shao to do what he wanted. Furthermore, the profit of the slave trade was not very high. Every year, Horlade would embezzle a portion of the trade. She had seen it all, but did not do anything about it. Today was a coincidence, so of course, she would not speak up for Horlade. Horlade was dumbfounded. Frustration echoed in his chest, almost exploding his chest. Looking at Han Zhao's mocking eyes, he was so angry that his mouth twisted. He could not help but say, "I suspect that this attack was orchestrated by Black Star, just to save the silvers. Yes, that must be it. Those brutes were all his helpers. All right, he also let a group of people escape. Those people must be his companions." Horlade got more and more excited as he spoke. Although it was just a flash of inspiration, he felt that his guess made sense. Han Xiao raised his eyebrows and said casually, "We are colleagues. How can you put the blame on me?" Although Horlade's intention to put the blame on him was very bad, this guess was not valid at all. They had enough alibis, and it happened to come from Jenny. Jenny was worried about him, a newcomer, and arranged for people to secretly monitor them. This time, it happened to be the most powerful evidence. Therefore, Jenny was not moved at all. She frowned and said, "Okay, this matter ends here. Horlade, you slandered your colleagues for no reason. You are temporarily suspended. When you calm down, I will assign you a new job." Horlade's heart was cold. He knew that the situation was set. He was so angry that his teeth were itching. Suddenly, he remembered that he had dealt with Han Xiao like this before, and Han Xiao had taken revenge in the same way. This time, he was the one who was at his wit's end. A sense of powerlessness ran through his body. He simply ignored it, rolled his eyes, and fainted again. Since nothing could be changed, he might as well sleep for a while more. Otherwise, he would die of anger from the looks of ridicule around him. Ignoring Horlade, who was lying on the ground, Han Xiao coughed and said, "Jenny, you should call me boss." "Forget it, call me by my name." Jenny's expression changed. Usually, only the boss Ames, as well as Will Sander and Higher, who were of the same rank, called her by her name. This was because her capable and tough style made her subordinates respect her. This was the first time that her subordinates called her by her name. It felt weird. Han Xiao continued, "I know the identity of the people who escaped. They are not ordinary thugs." As he said this, Han Xiao lowered his voice and whispered in her ear, "They're from Dark Star." Jenny's eyes suddenly focused, and she said in a deep voice, "When you finish the work here, come to me immediately for a detailed report." After that, Jenny hurriedly left with her people, leaving only the logistics team here to clean up the ruins. Han Xiao and the others came to the side. All the rescued slaves stared at him with different expressions. They were all nervous. They finally got their freedom, and they didn't want to lose it again. They didn't know what to do next. Han Xiao walked out of the crowd, looked around, and said lightly, "My name is Black Star, the leader of the Black Star Mercenary. Remember my name. I gave you freedom. You owe me a favor. Maybe one day when we meet again, I will need your help. You can go." All the slaves were stunned, and one of them asked in a trembling voice, Can we really leave?" Han Xiao waved his hand, indicating that they could leave at any time. One of them carefully walked out, and, after a few steps, he turned his head back. After walking for dozens of meters, he found that no one was stopping him. He was ecstatic. "We are really free." The people couldn't believe that freedom came so easily. However, the first slave who walked out didn't run away immediately. Instead, he turned around and bowed to Han Xiao with gratitude. He said loudly, "Black Star, I will remember this name." The slaves left one after another with gratitude, showing Han Xiao all kinds of etiquette. Han Xiao didn't feel much, but the players behind him suddenly felt a sense of accomplishment and comfort. They held their heads high and felt that they had done a good thing. Haluz felt the most empathetic. He patted Han Zhao's shoulder and praised, "Well done." The members looked at Han Zhao's back with kindness in their eyes. At this moment, they felt a sense of approval for Han Xiao. For the players to like a character other than strength, there was another condition: charisma and approval. Han Xiao had always created a positive image for the players, and his act of freeing the slaves raised his image again. Port Bun recorded this scene faithfully. Han Xiao turned around and saw that there were still a few slaves of the same race who did not leave. "Why aren't you leaving?" These people were obviously familiar with each other, and they looked similar. They looked at each other, and one of them said, We were originally mercenaries. We followed a small mercenary group and encountered danger during a mission. Most of the members died, and only we were lucky enough to escape. However, we were captured by slave traders and locked up for more than a year. Our group was destroyed long ago, and we have nowhere to go. We hope that you can take us in and give us a job. You are our savior, and we are willing to serve you. Chapter 378. Han Xiao was a little surprised. He had only planned to let the slaves go and thought that the slaves would be eager to return home. He did not expect that there would be people willing to stay. He asked them in detail and decided to take in the three of them. The three Volga brothers were from the Tamaharantines. This was a small civilization in the Shattered Star Ring. Their civilization level was equivalent to Sunil before the disaster, and they had a certain level of space travel ability. They were magic-type civilization that focused on the psychic branch. Their race's specialty was telepathy, and they could complete the exchange of information by looking at each other. To a certain extent, they did not need to speak, and telepathy was the strongest between close relatives. The technological foundation of their civilization was the first demon mineral vein, and they developed a technological tree based on materials that contained magic as the energy source. They had a religion and a high fertility rate. They would mate, reproduce, and give birth to animals. The incubation time was about a year. Normal humans would give birth to one child at a time, but the Tamaharantines would give birth a few times in their lifetime. They had always been troubled by the problem of population expansion. The Tamaharantines looked similar to humans, but they were shorter with an average height of 6 meters. They had white skin and natural runes on their bodies. The more eye-catching feature was their pure white eyes, which were like a whole piece of white crystal. The Tamaharantines had very high psychic talents. If they awakened, most of them would become psychics. The eldest and second of the three Volga brothers were both psychics, and the youngest was a mage. They were all grade C supers, around LV70. Although their strength was average, they made up for the lack of classes in the mercenary group. This way, the mercenary group finally had 5 superclasses, making up for the lack of abilities. Mages can perform blessings and enchantments to add new abilities to machines, which can indirectly increase my combat strength. Han Xiaoxin was very happy. The Black Star mercenary had 3 new officers, which increased the faction reward limit by almost 10,000 points. The limit was now 185,000 points. The 3 brothers were full of respect and gratitude. They accepted Han Zhao's arrangement. Even if they were free, they would still continue to be mercenaries. Instead of working alone, they would rather join Han Zhao's team. Other than repaying his kindness with their bodies, they could also take care of each other. After accepting the 3 brothers, it was time to solve the problem of Erosia. Han Xiao pondered. The mission required him to keep her by his side for 6 days. There had to be a reason, and it would not be completed smoothly. Although he did not know the exact reason, he just had to do as he was told. What troubled him was how to deal with Erosia's identity. Should she also become a mercenary? However, although Erosia had a high energy reaction, she did not seem to know how to use it in battle. It was unclear whether it was her racial talent or her personal strength. Furthermore, she had completely lost her memory. There was no way to know her identity and communicate with her. The others were eagerly waiting for Han Xiao to explain the background of this great beauty. Her name is Erosia. She's also a rescued slave. From today onwards, she will temporarily follow us, Han Xiao said. Mad Blade was puzzled. Why did you keep her? Also, why isn't she saying anything? He had been wanting to ask this question for a long time. Ever since Han Xiao had brought her out, Erosia had not opened her mouth. Although her appearance was extremely in line with human aesthetics and she had stunned the players, it was followed by doubts. What was wrong with this beautiful girl? Amnesia. Han Xiao pointed at his head and thought of an explanation. That's why I was worried about her running around, so I took her with me. She has no place to go anyway. Such a beautiful girl is actually sick in the head. What a pity. Second Prince shook his head. What do you know? This is called taking advantage of the situation. Pork Bun gave Han Shao a wretched look, as if to say, "Brother, I understand you." Maple Moon and Rainy Kim immediately glared at him. Han Shao rolled his eyes. A bunch of indecent people. Can't they have any pure thoughts in their heads? Mad Blade looked left and right. He felt that Orochia was too calm. She did not look like someone who had lost her memory at all. He was puzzled. I feel that she is weird. Can she communicate? This reminded Han Shao. Horlade had said that Orochia still remembered the language. He immediately put on a translator for her and asked, "Can you speak?" Orochia heard this and finally reacted. She opened her mouth and said, "Yes." Her voice was like the sound of a clear spring. It was clear and ethereal, making everyone feel comfortable. It was as if a pair of soft hands were comforting their ears. This made the players who had heard enough of Pork Bun's hoarse voice very satisfied. "You really don't remember anything?" Han Shao was refreshed. It was good that she could communicate. "Yes." "Then are you willing to come with us temporarily?" "Yes." Then do you need anything?" "Anything is fine." "You have lost your memory. Don't you want to find out your identity?" "It's okay." Hearing this answer, everyone gasped. It was as if they could see the brilliance of the Buddha's nature in the dark. How can this amnesia patient be so calm? "No, this is not just amnesia. You should take your medicine, beauty." Han Shao was completely out of ideas. He smiled helplessly. "Then that's it. My team members will take care of you." "You." At this time, Orochia suddenly walked toward Han Shao, leaned close to his face, and sniffed like a puppy. She said, "I seem to have sensed a certain aura on your body somewhere." Han Shao was stunned and felt surprised. He continued to ask, but Orochia shook her head and said, "I don't remember. I just feel that it's familiar." Strange. He could only suppress his doubts and let everyone settle down. In any case, Orochia did not eat, drink, or excrete. She was very easy to take care of. This was originally a characteristic of energy life forms. Orochia was a normal life form. He did not know why, but the good thing was that he did not have to worry about her starving to death. Han Shao took the aircraft all the way to the office building and met Jenny in the office on the top floor. Jenny had a serious expression and asked, "Can you confirm that they're Dark Star?" Han Shao nodded and explained what had happened in detail. He hid his personal information, such as the interface, and changed it to that he knew Ashes. In the end, he added, "Ashes is the next generation ace that Dark Star is cultivating. There must be a huge secret behind this operation. Although we're a neutral organization, and the conflict between Dark Star and Ghidorah has nothing to do with us, they have to pay a corresponding price for daring to cause trouble on Floating Dragon Island." Jenny nodded, pushed her glasses, and said with a frown, "Dark Star has always been peaceful with us. There must be a reason for this, but I'm not interested in understanding their intentions. I only want to find out who is responsible. Luckily, you recognize their background. Otherwise, Dark Star would have really escaped. When Her Excellency Ames returns, Dark Star will pay the price for this provocation." Successfully causing trouble for Dark Star, Han Shao nodded in his mind. To deal with a large organization, using someone else to do the dirty work was naturally the best way. Dark Star was very secretive and powerful. If he did not wait for the storyline to start, Han Shao would not be able to do anything to them. However, Dark Star had personally given him an opportunity, so how could he not make use of it? With Ames' personality and her recent bad mood, Dark Star could be said to have bumped into the muzzle of a gun. It was a pity that Ames was not on Floating Dragon Island at the moment. Otherwise, she would have directly killed Dark Star's future ace while he was still growing. That would have been a huge blow to Dark Star. Floating Dragon would not reveal any information and let Dark Star think that they were safe. They would then deal with them when the time came. Because Han Shao had joined Floating Dragon Island, he was able to borrow the power of one of the largest organizations in the Shattered Star Ring. All along, Han Shao had been using his advantage very well. At this moment, he finally flapped his wings in the galaxy. The complicated relationship between the various civilizations was hundreds of times more complicated than that of Blue Star. Even if he caused a small ripple, it could lead to a huge tsunami after being catalyzed by many parties. NT Chapter 379. What reward do you want for your contribution? Ginny asked. I wish to obtain the permission to use the void dragon bones, Han Xiao said. Ginny nodded. Hire is in charge of the warehouse. I'll talk to him and give you a limited amount of void dragon materials. Hire was in charge of logistics, so all rare materials had to be approved by him. Han Xiao's request was very normal, so Hire naturally would not reject it. Han Xiao was overjoyed. Void dragon materials were priceless and could not even be bought. They could be considered as a faction specialty. It was true that those closest to the water enjoyed the benefits first. No matter if he sold them or kept them to build his own machinery, void dragon materials would be very useful. After Han Xiao left, Ginny leaned back in her chair and murmured, Black Star, Han Xiao, is not the kind of guy who will tremble under Aim's power. He has a lot of secrets, claims to be a diviner, and all his subordinates are immortal. Such power, if there are more of them. Sigh, although such a person is a capable assistant, I don't know if it's a good thing. After a pause, Ginny's brows relaxed. Never mind, it doesn't matter who he is. As long as Ames is still there, it's enough to suppress all unexpected factors. Walking out of the building, Han Xiaoxin was very happy. He had gained a lot this time, so he planned to take a good shower and then go to the warehouse to get the materials and count the benefits. Suddenly, he had an idea, and a possibility appeared in his mind. Darkstar's target is the 2 dead silvers. If I were them, the clue of the silvers would be broken. The next step would be to find other people involved. Therefore, there's a high chance that Darkstar will look for the slave dealer who escorted the silvers. Han Xiao realized this and immediately changed his direction to the dock. He quickly disguised himself on the way, took off his recognizable mechanical suit and weapons, and put on the simulator mask. He secretly rejoiced that he had realized this in time. It had only been an hour since the attack, and there was a high chance that Ashes and the others would be hiding for a while. This was the perfect opportunity for him to seize the initiative and figure out Darkstar's intentions. Let me see what Darkstar wants. Han Zhao's lips curled up, revealing a smirk. At the same time, on a certain street in the outer streets of Floating Dragon Island, Ashes and the others were hiding in the shadows between the houses. The aircraft flew past them, but they did not see them. Ashes and the others had escaped the detection range and were basically safe. This operation was a blunder, and the expressions of the task force were not good. Ashes suppressed his annoyance and ordered in a deep voice, There's no time to lose. Let's find that slave trader and complete the mission as soon as possible. Don't stay on Floating Dragon Island for too long. A mechanic who was good at electronics said, We've found the information. That slave trader is called Peggy. He's staying at Floating Dragon Dock. All right, he hasn't left Floating Dragon Island yet. This is very beneficial to us. Ashes was energized and led the group toward the dock. He had a feeling that Peggy definitely knew the whereabouts of the secret message bead. The number of spaceships docked at the dock was much fewer than before, and the formation was sparse. There were 2 reasons for this. First, there had been too much turbulence in the past few days. During the previous battle at the dock, Ames had made a move and frightened many brutes. They had left in a hurry and did not dare to stay, fearing that they would be punished. Second, the route of Floating Dragon Island was about to pass through the border of the 2 civilizations in the Jellic Star Cluster. This was a sensitive area where conflicts often occurred. Energy detection buoys and patrol fleets were everywhere, and the alert level was extremely high. If they left Floating Dragon Island in this area, the danger factor would greatly increase. The patrol fleets would not be stingy with their cannons to get rid of a group of wanted criminals. So many people chose to leave before that. Peggy had the same idea and was prepared to leave Floating Dragon Island. Although he had lost a large amount of income from being betrayed by Horlade, there were still other slaves on the ship. He sold them to other individual customers to make up for the cost of this trip. However, he did not make any profit, so one could imagine how unhappy he was. Therefore, an hour ago, when Peggy heard that Horlade's slave market had been bombed, he laughed like a 200-pound fatty, not hiding his gloating at all. That profiteer, he deserves to lose everything. Peggy was in a rare mood. His legs were on the control panel of the captain's room, and his eyes moved as he murmured, The silvers were rescued again. What a pity, if only I could rob them. Then he shook his head. This possibility only existed in his imagination. He fully understood that the silvers were a hot potato now. Other than the mercenaries, they were also coveted by other unknown forces. This pool was very deep. As a group of slave traders, he did not have the ability to intervene. He did not have the hobby of committing suicide. Just the last time he met Han Xiao, he had almost been beaten in a snake soup. Now that he thought about it, Peggy still had a lingering fear of that black, thick, and hard mechanical suit warrior. Start the engine. Let's go. Several pilots operated manually. The bottom of the spaceship spewed out flames and was about to leave the fixed track of the dock. At this time, the spaceship system sent a notification from the dock. Attention all captains, we are about to encounter a large group of meteorites in front. Countdown of 3 minutes. At that time, the protective shield will be fully opened, and no spaceships are allowed to enter or exit. Please be aware of this. A radar observation image appeared on the screen. A large number of dense colored blocks were approaching at high speed. They were all meteorites. Under such circumstances, it was too dangerous for a spaceship to move alone. Peggy quickly asked people to turn off the engine and stay behind. He would rely on Floating Dragon's protective ability to survive this wave of meteorites before making a decision. The golden shield was activated. Floating Dragon Island used to be able to see the universe through the man-made atmosphere. But now, the sky was completely covered in gold. The entire Floating Dragon Island turned into a rugby ball-shaped golden sphere. The plasma energy core was operating at the highest efficiency, and high-energy light arcs shot out from the surface of the golden shield from time to time. It was like a bait thrown by a star or a jumping python. The group of meteorites came head-on, covering the sky and the earth. They were of different sizes, and the largest one was about 1/3 of the size of the floating island. Floating Dragon Island rushed in head-on. Countless meteorites hit the golden shield, creating circles of golden ripples. The energy waves created by the collision spread far and wide in the universe, leaving behind traces. On the floating island, there was an obvious vibration on the ground. Han Xiao happened to come to the dock at this time. He changed his outfit, took off his mechanical suit, and put on a hooded black robe that he bought from a shop on the street. He looked very mysterious. He changed his face with a simulation mask, so no one could recognize him. Coming to Peggy's spaceship port, Han Xiao turned on the communicator, searched for the nearby channels, found Peggy's number, and sent a communication request. To put it in a more down-to-earth way, it would be easier to understand. He did not add Peggy as a friend, so he could only search for people nearby. After a while, the communication was accepted. Peggy's face appeared on the screen. He asked in confusion, "Why are you looking for me? I have something to ask you about the silvers." Peggy's heart tightened. He originally decided not to interfere with the silvers, but he did not expect to be involved. He calmed himself down and asked, "Who are you?" "Dark Star." Han Xiao lowered his voice. He had deeper considerations to replace Dark Star. Peggy's expression suddenly became weird. His first reaction was disbelief. This stranger who came out of nowhere was not a hybrid Godora. He felt like he was just using Dark Star as an excuse, just like the silver who was thrown out of the spaceship. After all, Dark Star was quite famous in the Shattered Star Ring. Many people liked to use it to scare others. "Do you have evidence?" Peggy was skeptical. Han Xiao pretended to be tough and said coldly, "I'm the one asking you now. The 2 silvers you threw out of the spaceship have something we want. As for my identity, I don't need to prove it to you. As long as you try to reject me, you will naturally know whether the person who erased you is Dark Star or not. Of course, if you cooperate, I can pay some money for this information." Because of the limited information, Han Xiao only said the 4 points that he had guessed before. However, it was a lucky hit. In order to survive, the carrier revealed the fact that he was Dark Star's emissary, and only a few people, including Peggy, knew about this. Peggy did not believe it at first, but when he heard what Han Xiao said, he immediately thought of the bead. Connecting the 2 party statements, most of them matched, and he was shocked. What the F asterisk CK? That Silver can't really be Dark Star's emissary, right? He really came to me? Peggy's doubts were mostly dispelled. He was both nervous and excited. In his mind, Dark Star was the great pioneer who saved Ghidorah. He had hit the jackpot this time. However, he killed Dark Star's emissary. Would it be a problem? Chapter 380. After hesitating for a while, Peggy felt that it was better to believe it than not, so he said truthfully, a Silver claimed to be a messenger from Dark Star. I found a black bead on him. I didn't know what it was, but I thought it was a treasure, so I took it with me. However, a few days ago, I lost the bead during the battle at the dock. It might have been picked up by someone because the bead was not with him. There was no loss in telling the truth. The other party was probably a Dark Star, not to mention that he was his idol, just based on Dark Star's style of doing things. If he refused to disclose the information, the consequences would be predictable. According to the risk assessment, compromise was the safest. Han Xiao narrowed his eyes. Bead? What is that? Why have I not heard of this in my previous life? Is it a hidden plot? Han Xiaoxin's heart moved. It seemed possible. Dark Star sent Ash's representative with great importance. Maybe it was a large-scale secret mission that no one had triggered in his previous life. You are very cooperative. I will pay a certain reward for the information. There is no need for the reward. I just want to join Dark Star. Peggy rubbed his hands and said. Hearing this, Han Xiao suddenly understood. No wonder Peggy did not bargain before the information was revealed. It turned out that he was a potential supporter of Dark Star. Back then, when he saw that Peggy was a mixed-blood Ghidorah, Han Xiao had a guess. He chose to replace Dark Star's name, not only to cause trouble, but also to try his luck, and he actually won. In fact, the reasoning was not difficult. Peggy was a mixed-blood Ghidorah and a wanted criminal who did not tolerate order, so his political orientation was more likely to support Dark Star. Han Xiao dared to use the name of Dark Star because he considered that Ashes would hide his true identity in order to keep it secret. Even if Ashes came to ask first, he would use another identity. If he used the identity of a mercenary, Peggy would definitely hate them. He might not get the information and might even expose himself. With a cough, Han Xiao pretended to be serious. I can see your conviction. You are a Ghidorah person with a sense of awareness. Our great cause needs hot-blooded people like you. Without waiting for Peggy to be happy, Han Xiao changed the topic. However, we have strict screening procedures for newcomers to prevent spies from sneaking in. It just so happens that I need your help with something. There is another force on this floating island that is secretly competing with us for this pearl. Before me, has anyone asked the same question as me? No. That's good. We're one step ahead of them. This is your chance to contribute to the organization. Later, they'll probably come to you and ask you the same question as I did. Just tell them that the bead has been thrown into outer space. Han Xiao held back his laughter and said, After you complete this task, Dark Star will accept you at the right time and take you to a secret base to receive formal training. I understand. Peggy was convinced, and his expression was solemn. He did not expect the pool of silvers to be so deep. He could not help but be curious about the secret of that pearl that would attract a major force to secretly compete for it. At the same time, Peggy was also annoyed. If he had noticed the extraordinariness of the pearl at that time, he might have been able to obtain greater benefits and would not have done such a thing. However, it was too late to regret now. After ending the communication, Han Xiao turned around and left the dock. He waited until there was no one around before changing back to his original outfit. So what Dark Star wants is a black pearl, but its whereabouts are unknown. Although there were gains, the information was still very little. If he followed the normal method, the clues would have ended there. However, Han Xiao did not take the normal path. Since I know what the target is, I'll try using the Destiny's Child card. Hopefully, it'll be worth it. Han Xiao decided to use the prediction card. At least, he had to know what the target was. Although Peggy's information was scarce, it happened to meet the conditions. You have used character summon card, Destiny's Child. Number of uses / the familiar hazy fog appeared, like a scene from a dream. Han Zhao's gaze passed through the fog. and a black pearl appeared in front of him. It was caught in a palm. Looking up along the arm, a handsome face was fixed in Han Zhao's eyes. After a full 2 seconds, the image shattered and returned to the original environment, as if he had experienced an illusion. Li Ge. Han Zhao's eyes widened. He really did not expect that the pearl would be picked up by a player, and by this naughty kid at that. No wonder it was not given to him. Just 20 minutes after Han Xiao left, Ashes arrived late, rushed to the dock, and found Peggy. Peggy remembered Han Zhao's instructions, and his expression changed slightly. As expected, Darkstar's competitor came so quickly. "Who are you? What do you want?" "I'm a mercenary, and my employer is a silver. The captives have been saved, and you're no longer our enemy. Now, I have something to ask you. Did you kill 2 silvers? We want to know the details, and for that, I can pay a certain amount of information." Ashes chose to pretend to be a mercenary. Only mercenaries knew about the 2 dead silvers, so it was reasonable to ask about his motive. Otherwise, it would be easy to arouse suspicion and be reported as the murderer who attacked the slave market. In his impression, he had not been exposed, and no one knew about their identity as Darkstar. However, his choice happened to form a coincidence. Han Xiao and Ashes mysteriously swapped identities. Peggy believed it even more. He thought that Han Xiao was Darkstar, and Ashes, who really belonged to Darkstar, was regarded as the enemy of Darkstar. What was more coincidental was that because everyone only had a part of the information, Peggy and Ashes were kept in the dark. Only Han Xiao could barely see the truth. His trick made the 2 of them deviate from the path to the truth. "You're a mercenary?" Peggy's eyes were filled with hatred. It was the mercenary who made him lose a lot of money, and you still want information? "If it wasn't for Darkstar's order, I wouldn't even care about you," Ashes said at the right time. "As long as you're willing to answer, I can pay 50,000 for the information to make up for your loss. This is a lot of money." Darkstar was rich. Ashes directly transferred 10,000 as a deposit and was confident that he could make Peggy talk. Even though Peggy was not a money grubber, he was shocked by this generous offer. He did not look like a mercenary at all. He rolled his eyes, pretended to be moved by the money, and talked about the process of capturing the silvers, only hiding the secret message bead as a test. Sure enough, Ashes heard until the end and found that the information he wanted was missing. He had to point out the target and said, "Did you find a black bead on those 2? "What bead? I've never seen it before. I threw them out of the spaceship and didn't bother to waste time searching them. The thing you said is probably also floating in the universe." Peggy sneered in his heart and lied according to Han Zhao's order. Ash's eyes flashed with a hint of gloominess. This was the worst result. If the carrier's body was accidentally captured by a star, the secret message bead would also be destroyed. If it was attracted by a black hole, it would not be found at all. "By the way, did anyone ask you the same question?" Ashes suddenly asked. "No." Peggy immediately denied. Ashes frowned, transferred the rest of the reward to Peggy, and left with a heavy heart. At this point, the clues had been cut off. Their task force could not be used, so they could only report to the headquarters. In the spaceship, Peggy looked at the dark communication screen and smiled with anticipation. Joining Darkstar had always been his goal. Because Darkstar was too mysterious, he had never had the chance to come in contact with it. But now, the opportunity he had been dreaming of fell from the sky. Peggy was secretly excited. "I made a contribution to Darkstar. After waiting for so long, I finally got the chance. I can finally join Darkstar." Near the ruins of the slave market, the players did not need to return to the guards. They temporarily settled the 3 Volga brothers and Erosia. Everyone surrounded Erosia like crazy bees and butterflies. Erosia's beauty was off the charts, and she was also a great beauty who had lost her memory. With Pork Bun as the representative, most of the male players' hormones were overflowing. They were very excited and chatted with Erosia one after another. Erosia had a calm expression that said, "Anything is fine." She did not have much interest in the things around her, and just replied to them casually. On the side, the gods of the various clubs remained reserved and stayed far away, chatting with each other. "Find the bead. Mission introduction. Some time ago, Black Star lost a black bead. If someone can find it and give it to him, they will receive his reward. Mission requirements. Turn the black bead additional. Appearance reward. EXP. Plus Black Star mercenary favorability. X Sunil NCO class armor. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.